Close your eyes and imagine a forest where time moves slowly, where leaves fall like whispered memories, and each shadow hides a story of spirits long unremembered. You are invited to step softly into this quiet world, where the air is fragrant with earth and smoke from sacred fires, and every breeze carries echoes of chants that have drifted across centuries. Tonight, you will wander through the sacred landscapes of tribal beliefs, listening to the heartbeat of rituals, the shimmer of creation myths, and the silent wisdom of ancestors. Let the gentle rhythm of their stories carry your mind towards stillness. There is no hurry here. Every story arrives at its own pace, unfolding as petals of thought in the moonlight. Allow your awareness to settle, like water in a calm pool, reflecting the stars of forgotten knowledge. Each chapter will be a soft lantern, guiding you deeper into the quiet reverence of spirits who once danced between the tangible and the unseen. As you listen, let your thoughts drift with ease, welcoming the slow, eternal wisdom of the tribal world. Chapter 1: The Sacred Breath of the Ancestors. In the quiet dawn of tribal life, before the first songs rose with the sun, there was breath. The ancestors breathed, and in that simple, continuous motion, they shaped not only their bodies, but the world itself. Breath was never merely a biological necessity. Among early communities, it became a living thread that connected the present with what had come before, and with what was yet to arrive. Every inhalation and exhalation was a subtle acknowledgement of life's continuity, a recognition that the line between the mortal and the eternal was thinner than the space between. Heartbeats. In many tribal cultures, breath held a sacred significance. It was understood as the invisible river flowing between worlds. The living carried it as a gift, while the departed left behind traces that lingered like mist in the morning air. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer and early agrarian societies have noted that rituals often began with the conscious regulation of breath, a slow inhalation to welcome the unseen, a measured exhale to release intention into the world. Breath, in these acts, was both prayer and bridge. It created rhythm in daily life and ritual, shaping the cadence of work, rest, and ceremonial observance alike. Among the Plains tribes of North America, for instance, the first inhalation upon waking was more than a biological act. It was an acknowledgement of the Great Spirit. Elders taught that every breath carried a message to ancestors, whispering gratitude for guidance and protection. Similarly, in the dense forests of Central Africa, tribal initiations often incorporated extended periods of controlled breathing. These exercises were not simply meditative. They were invitations for ancestral spirits to enter the body, allowing young participants to feel the pulse of generations who had walked the same land, tended the same fires, and observed the same stars. The sacred breath was also a rhythm of presence. In many early communities, it marked time in ways both practical and spiritual. Work in the fields, preparation of meals, or the crafting of tools was synchronized with inhalation and exhalation, creating a living harmony that reminded the tribe of its place in the greater web of life. Anthropologists call this embodied ritual a way in which human activity is inseparable from spiritual awareness. Breath, in these moments, was a teacher. It instructed patience, attuned the senses, and anchored awareness in the present. There is a subtle universality in this practice. Across continents and cultures, breath appears as a conduit of sacred energy. In India, the Vedic texts describe prana, the life force carried through breath, which connects all living things. Among Pacific Islander cultures, similar beliefs arise, with elders speaking of spirit winds that accompany inhalation and exhalation, a quiet acknowledgement that each person carries not only themselves, but the lineage of those who came before. These echoes of understanding suggest a profound human intuition, that the air moving in and out of our lungs is a medium for unseen forces, and that our ancestors continue to reside in the spaces between breaths. The act of breathing, simple as it may appear, became a ceremonial tool. Consider the sun dances of the plains tribes. Participants would move in precise steps, coordinating their breathing with each motion. It was a method to enter trance states, to connect with the unseen, and to honor the spirits of animals, land, and sky. Breath regulated not only the body but consciousness itself, enabling humans to perceive dimensions of existence that ordinary awareness might miss. The rhythm of inhalation and exhalation was, in a sense, a sacred metronome, keeping time with the heartbeat of the world. Even in daily life, the sacred breath was observed in subtle ways. Mothers taught children to breathe with awareness, particularly during rites of passage or moments of reflection. Hunters paused at the edge of forests, matching their breathing to the wind, to the rustle of leaves, to the distant calls of animals. Such attentiveness was more than superstition. It was survival, empathy, and spirituality entwined. Every breath carried history, memory, and hope. The simple act of breathing became an acknowledgement that life was never isolated, that each moment was a point of contact with forces both visible and invisible in ritual contexts. Breath was often paired with sound. Chants, intonations, and humming were synchronized with inhalation and exhalation, creating vibrations that were thought to resonate beyond the physical body. Among the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, ceremonial songs often began with controlled breathing exercises, intended to open pathways to ancestral guidance. Similarly, in pre-Columbian Mesoamerican cultures, priests and shamans emphasized the breath as a means to communicate with the cosmos. Sound and air intertwined, creating a living conversation with forces that were otherwise silent. A dialogue carried on the invisible currents of the world. Even the architecture of early sacred spaces reflects an awareness of breath. Circular huts, ceremonial enclosures, and natural groves were arranged to enhance airflow, to allow inhalation and exhalation to harmonize with environmental rhythm. Anthropologists have suggested that these designs were practical, yet they also embody a subtle spirituality. Spaces were created so that the breath could move freely, connecting humans with the earth, sky, and the ancestral presence embedded in place. In this way, sacred architecture became a vessel for invisible life forces, reminding inhabitants that the body's rhythm was inseparable from the rhythm of the world. Breath also functions as a living archive. Every inhalation absorbs the sense, humidity, and energy of the environment. Every exhalation releases it back. In this way, the air we carry and release holds faint traces of history, traces of ancestors, of rituals performed long ago, of the seasons as they turned, when a tribe gathered to honor the passing of elders, or to consecrate new tools or garments. The collective breathing of the group became a subtle record of continuity. The pulse of life, preserved in air, was a meditation on mortality, memory, and the invisible bonds that unite generations. Reflecting on this, you may notice your own breath. Inhale slowly, and imagine the line of humans stretching behind you, each taking in air, each exhaling in rhythm with the land. Feel the subtle weight of generations within you, the quiet whispers of ancestors who continue to influence your world. Every breath is both ordinary and extraordinary, a link between your present, the past, and the unfolding future. In this recognition, you may perceive a gentle pulse, a quiet reminder that you are never truly alone, that life is a continuum, and that the sacred is often found in the simplest, most persistent rhythms. Breath is perhaps the first and most enduring connection humans have known with the spiritual world. It is intimate yet expansive, personal yet universal, across centuries and continents. The conscious attention to inhalation and exhalation has provided a bridge between mortality and eternity, between what is seen and unseen. The sacred breath continues to teach patience, awareness, and reverence, even for those who walk the modern world. As you reflect, consider the depth contained within each inhale and exhale. Think of the quiet ancestry that surrounds you, the subtle pulse that connects all who have lived, and the unseen currents of existence that continue to flow through air, body, and spirit. What stories do the breaths of those long gone carry? What guidance might they leave for the living in the spaces between one inhale and the next? In this gentle awareness, the sacred breath of the ancestors continues, unbroken, flowing through the world and through you. Chapter 2: Fires That Remember. Fire has always held a quiet authority in human life, more than simply heat or light. From the earliest settlements to the great ritual grounds of tribal communities, fire was a keeper of stories. Its glow danced across faces, highlighting eyes and expressions with a warmth that felt both immediate and enduring. It was a presence, steady yet ever-changing, a living witness to countless generations. In the earliest societies, fire was not merely functional. It was spiritual. It connected the mortal to the eternal, the visible to the unseen. Each flame carried a history, a memory, and a subtle guidance for those who approached it with reverence. Anthropologists note that among hunter-gatherer tribes, fire often served as a central gathering point. Around the flames, elders spoke, recited lineage stories, and taught lessons of survival and morality. The fire's crackle was both sound and rhythm, shaping the flow of conversation and contemplation. Its smoke carried more than scent. It carried prayers, hopes, and acknowledgments of ancestors who attended their own fires in times long past. In many ways, the flame became a bridge between time, linking present actions with the traditions and wisdom of those who came before. Tribal ceremonies elevated fire from practical tool to sacred presence. Among the Plains tribes, the ceremonial fire was kindled with strict observance and ritual care. Only certain individuals, often elders or shamans, had the authority to touch the embers, to feed the flame, and to maintain its purity. The fire was a messenger, carrying the intentions of the living to the realm of spirits. Offerings, corn, herbs, or small crafted items were placed within the heat and smoke, releasing messages that were thought to travel beyond the physical world. Here, fire became a medium of communication, a vessel of transformation, and a silent witness to devotion in Central and South America. Sacred fires played a similar role. The Mesoamerican civilizations often aligned ceremonial fires with astronomical events, tying the act of tending flame to cycles of sun, moon, and stars. Fire marked moments of transition, the end of harvest, the beginning of a ritual fast, the initiation of youth into societal roles. The flames became mirrors, reflecting both physical reality and inner consciousness. Observers believed that through careful attention to fire, they could perceive patterns, hear guidance, and gain insight into the balance of life and cosmos. Fire was also central to initiation rites. Among African tribes, young initiates often spent hours or nights in proximity to ritual fires. They would observe the flames, listen to their crackling and shifting patterns, and meditate on the stories embedded in the smoke. These hours were not merely symbolic. They were exercises in attention, endurance, and spiritual attunement. The fire's heat demanded respect, and its rhythm the subtle flickering and sudden flare taught lessons in patience and awareness. In these ceremonies, the fire became both teacher and companion, reminding the initiates of the delicate balance between power and humility. Purification is another consistent theme in tribal interactions with fire. Across the world, smoke was used to cleanse both space and spirit. Herbs, resins, or leaves were added to flames to produce aromatic smoke that enveloped participants, purging negativity and inviting clarity. This practice appears among North American, Amazonian, and Australian Aboriginal communities alike. Fire, in this sense, was not only an element but also an active agent of spiritual hygiene. It was believed that the smoke absorbed impurities, carrying them away into the air and leaving the participants lighter, calmer, and more connected with both land and ancestry, even beyond ceremonial contexts. The nightly fire offered a space for reflection. In tribal villages, families would gather round the flames at the close of day. Stories of hunts, of courage, of loss and renewal were recounted quietly, each tale punctuated by the fire's subtle hiss or pop. In these moments, the fire was more than an object. It was a silent listener, an ever-present witness to human vulnerability and hope. Its warmth was a comfort, its glow a gentle reminder of continuity. Through these nightly gatherings, knowledge and culture were preserved without writing, carried in memory and breath, with the fire holding the stories until the next day. Fire's visual and sensory qualities reinforced its sacred role. The flickering of flames created movement in still spaces, transforming the familiar into something dynamic, almost alive. The shifting light revealed textures of wood, earth, and skin, highlighting details that might otherwise go unnoticed. The orange-red glow mirrored the heart's warmth, while the smoke curling upward suggested subtle pathways to the sky. These simple physical phenomena became imbued with spiritual significance. Observers often interpreted flame shapes as messages, omens, or symbols, yet even without literal meaning, the fire's presence inspired mindfulness and reverence beyond human observation. Fire was also thought to carry the spirits of ancestors themselves. Among many indigenous American groups, the ritual fire was considered a living entity capable of receiving messages and returning guidance. Ancestors, it was believed, could inhabit the flames, offering counsel or silently witnessing the rites of their descendants. In other regions, similar beliefs emerged. The flames were alive with ancestral energy, ever present, watching and reflecting the devotion of the living. This perspective transformed a practical element into a sacred interlocutor, a medium through which life and death, past and present, subtly intertwined. Consider the metaphysical rhythm of fire. It rises and falls, grows bright and then settles, disappears only to be rekindled. This rhythm mirrors the human experience, the cycles of life, reflection, and memory. It teaches that transformation is constant, that even the smallest spark carries potential, and that attentive care preserves life and tradition. The fire, in its presence, encourages a mindful engagement with the world, inviting observers to notice impermanence, to honor continuity, and to dwell within quiet attention. As you reflect on the significance of fire, you may sense its lessons extending beyond tribal practices into your own awareness. Each flicker becomes a point of meditation, a reminder that warmth, guidance, and continuity exist in both visible and invisible forms. The stories carried in the flames are not only histories of survival and belief, they are subtle invitations to observe, to listen, and to contemplate the unseen forces that shape daily life. Even now, the fire teaches patience. It moves without haste, instructing that understanding and insight arrive through quiet observation rather than force. In this gentle awareness, the sacred fire becomes a companion to thought, a mirror for reflection, and a bridge between the tangible and the unseen. Its lessons are quiet but persistent: to honor ancestors, to perceive the sacred in ordinary acts, and to recognize that human life is woven into the cycles of nature and spirit. As the flames rise, as they bend and shimmer, they carry a message that is at once ancient and immediate. The past lives in the present, and the present, in attentive observation, becomes a vessel for continuity. And so, in the warmth of firelight, one can imagine the countless stories it has witnessed. Generations have watched, spoken, and listened by its glow. It has borne witness to joy and sorrow, to rites of passage, to moments of silent contemplation. Even when the flames die, the memory of the fire remains. It is remembered by the land, by the air, and by those who once tended it. Each ember is a keeper of history, each wisp of smoke a messenger of wisdom. Perhaps the fire's most enduring lesson is this: the sacred is not always distant or hidden. It is present in the quiet warmth, in the attentive care of a flame, in the act of gathering and observing. It asks only for patience, respect, and awareness. And if one listens carefully, the fire itself seems to ask a question in return. What stories do you carry within your own presence? And which will you leave behind, rising like smoke to mingle with the memories of those who came before? Chapter 3. Rivers of Spirit. Rivers have long been more than sources of water. They are the veins of the earth, flowing silently through landscapes, carrying life, memory, and meaning. Among many tribal communities, rivers were understood as living entities, possessing spirit and intention. They were witnesses to birth, guides in passage, and keepers of ancestral wisdom. The gentle movement of water, steady and persistent, mirrored the rhythms of human life. Its currents carried stories, songs, and prayers, flowing into the world while returning reflections of those who had come before. In early societies, rivers marked both practical and spiritual boundaries. Communities settled along their banks, relying on their waters for sustenance, yet always in a manner that acknowledged the river's sacred essence. Rituals often took place beside flowing waters, whether at the first light of dawn or the quiet hours of night. Offerings were placed in the current stones, flowers, or crafted items sent with intention downstream, as a message to the spirits of the river and ancestors alike. Such acts were not symbolic alone. They represented a dialogue, a form of exchange between human life and the continuous flow of the natural and spiritual world. Among the tribes of the Amazon basin, rivers were central to cosmology. Elders taught that each river had its own spirit, a guardian of the forest and the creatures within it. Songs were composed to honor these spirits, their melodies rising and falling like the currents themselves. Participants in ceremonies would often enter the river, wading carefully into its embrace, letting the water flow over their hands, arms, and faces. This act was both cleansing and grounding. It was a recognition that life is impermanent and yet continuous, that the same waters that nourish the living also carry the memories of generations past. In North America, the great river systems carried similar significance. Among tribes along the Mississippi and its tributaries, rivers were seen as sacred pathways. Canoes glided along the water, not only for travel but as vessels of ritual and contemplation. Water was a mirror, reflecting sky and forest, but also the unseen presence of ancestors. Elders taught that by observing the river's movement, one could gain insight into life's cycles, anticipate change, and attune to spiritual guidance. In these quiet observations, the river was both teacher and companion, offering lessons in patience, continuity, and reflection. The symbolism of rivers extends beyond physical boundaries. Water represents cleansing, renewal, and the passage from one state to another. Across cultures, ritual bathing in rivers marked transformation initiations, purification ceremonies, or preparation for sacred duties. In India, for example, rivers were believed to carry the power of deities themselves, and immersion was both literal and spiritual. The act of entering the river was an acknowledgement of interconnectedness, body, spirit, and environment intertwined. In these ceremonies, one could feel the flow of history beneath the surface, the countless hands, feet, and hearts that had touched the same waters before. Rivers also functioned as archives of memory. Sediment, stones, and currents recorded the passage of time, quietly preserving the imprint of human and natural activity. Stories passed along these waters became encoded in oral traditions, songs, myths, and chants that honored the river's spirit and the ancestors who had relied upon it. In some cases, sacred sites were established along riverbanks where particularly significant events had occurred. These spaces became anchors for communal identity, places where past, present, and future intersected with quiet solemnity. The relationship with rivers was not one of dominance but of reciprocity. Tribes recognized that to take water, fish, or plants from the river carried responsibility. Offerings were made in return. Rituals were performed to ensure the river's continued generosity. Observing this balance was a form of spiritual practice. By honoring the river's spirit, communities acknowledged the delicate interdependence of all life, learning that the world itself was alive with intention and presence. Even the act of listening to a river holds instruction. The sound of flowing water is subtle yet persistent. It invites awareness, slowing thought, and opening attention to subtle patterns. In many tribal teachings, the river's song carried guidance, the rhythm of life, the inevitability of change, and the quiet constancy of continuity. Observing a river's movement could reveal lessons in resilience, adaptation, and patience. There is a soft wisdom in the flow. It bends, it erodes, it nourishes, yet it persists. It reflects the subtle rhythm of human existence, always moving, always shaping, always sustaining. Rivers were also used to mark spiritual passage. Across cultures, crossing a river often symbolized a transition between childhood and adulthood, life and death, ignorance and insight. Among some Native American tribes, a river crossing was a physical and spiritual journey, a liminal space in which individuals were reminded of mortality, continuity, and their place within the larger flow of existence. Similarly, in Southeast Asia, Ritual crossings signified transformation, guiding participants to new roles within the community while simultaneously connecting them to ancestral guidance. The connection between river and ritual extends even to music and song. Many tribal communities composed chants to accompany flowing water, synchronizing voice and movement with the river's pace. These songs were both celebration and meditation. They honored the river, acknowledged the ancestors, and facilitated a gentle attunement of mind and spirit. In the stillness that followed, participants could perceive a subtle awareness of continuity, the river as a living memory, flowing through space and time, carrying both water and wisdom. Reflection on these practices invites quiet introspection. Just as rivers flow externally, so too do rivers flow within us. Thoughts, memories, and emotions move like currents, sometimes gentle, sometimes turbulent. The river, as metaphor, becomes a guide. It reminds us that cleansing is necessary, that renewal is possible, and that passage through life is continuous. Observing the waters, one might sense the ancestral presence in the currents, recognizing that our own thoughts are part of a much larger, enduring flow. Even today, the lessons of sacred rivers remain. In modern contexts, returning to rivers can offer grounding, mindfulness, and a connection to something larger than the self. Environmental stewardship, too, echoes the ancient understanding that rivers are living entities, deserving of care, respect, and attention. When we listen carefully, we can hear what tribal communities have long known, that the river is not simply water, but a vessel of life, memory, and spirit. As the currents move, they carry the whispers of those who came before, and perhaps also the questions of those who will come after. What have these waters seen, felt, and remembered? What guidance might they offer if one listens quietly enough? The river teaches patience, humility, and attentive presence. It reminds us that life flows onward, that each moment is connected to the past, and that the smallest gesture of reverence can ripple through the currents of time. In this awareness, the sacredness of rivers becomes clear. They are more than natural features. They are teachers, witnesses, and carriers of ancestral wisdom. They hold the stories of communities, the cycles of life, and the quiet rhythms that connect all existence. Watching a river, listening to its song, and acknowledging its spirit can be a practice in meditation, reflection, and connection. Each ripple, each current, is an invitation to attune oneself to a deeper, enduring rhythm, the flow of life itself, eternal and unbroken. And so, as you consider the rivers of the world and of memory, reflect on the waters that flow within you, the currents of thought, emotion, and inherited wisdom. Like the rivers of the earth, these inner flows carry both history and guidance. They move silently, persistently, shaping who we are and who we become. And if we listen carefully, perhaps we can hear the whispers of the ancestors, the quiet teachings of the water, and the enduring pulse of life flowing softly through all things. Chapter 4. The Dance of Shadows and Light. Shadows were never empty. In the quiet spaces of tribal life, they carried echoes of the unseen, impressions of spirits, and traces of ancestral presence. From the flickering firelight in the center of a village to the soft glow of dawn brushing across the forest floor, shadows held meaning. They moved and shifted, reminding communities that the world was layered not only the material, but also the spiritual, the symbolic, the unseen. In this way, shadow became more than a physical absence of light. It was a space for reflection, meditation, and sacred connection. Tribal dancers often engaged directly with this interplay of light and darkness. Movement was not performed simply for entertainment or ritual display. It was a form of communication, a dialogue with forces beyond the human realm. Dancers mirrored the rhythms of spirits, echoing gestures that had been passed down through generations. Hands, feet, and bodies traced patterns in the air, catching light in ways that transformed the ordinary into something luminous. Shadows became partners in these ceremonies, elongating, shrinking, and weaving across the ground as if performing alongside the dancers themselves. Anthropologists note that shadow and light played a role in both initiation rites and communal rituals. In Africa, certain forest tribes used torchlight and moonlight to create shifting patterns that guided initiates through complex ceremonies. The shadows became a medium for teaching, revealing symbolic lessons about duality, balance, and the hidden forces of life. By observing the way light interacted with movement, participants learned to read the invisible as carefully as the visible, to recognize that every gesture, every choice, carries both seen and unseen consequences in the Americas. Many indigenous groups incorporated shadows into storytelling. Masked dancers performed under the open sky or in ceremonial enclosures, projected the outlines of spirits onto walls or the ground. These projections were not illusions. They were understood as manifestations of energy, subtle presences that could teach, warn, or guide. The interplay of light and shadow made the familiar uncanny, opening space for reflection and reverence. In this practice, the observer became aware of boundaries between worlds, between the human and the divine, between memory and the present moment. Movement in these dances was carefully structured. Rhythm, repetition, and subtle variation created a flow that was both meditative and purposeful. Dancers synchronized with drum beats, clapping, or vocal chants, allowing shadows to respond as naturally as the body. Some rituals were performed in near darkness, where only the outlines of figures could be seen. In these moments, perception sharpened. The mind became more attuned to nuance, more open to the silent intelligence of the environment. Shadows and light, in this sense, were teachers, inviting patience, attention, and reverence. Across cultures, shadow also carried moral and spiritual significance. In certain Australian Aboriginal ceremonies, shadow figures were believed to contain ancestral wisdom. Mimicking their shapes in ritual dance was a form of engagement with history, ethics, and communal responsibility. The presence of shadow reminded participants that every action leaves an imprint, that life itself unfolds in contrasts and harmonies. Darkness was not feared, nor light taken for granted. Together they were complementary, interdependent, and alive with meaning. In many ceremonies, fire played a crucial role in shaping shadows. Its flickering glow created movement that could be both subtle and dramatic, reflecting gestures, objects, and dances in patterns that seemed to pulse with life. Watching the fire's light interact with movement, communities observed lessons about impermanence, transformation, and continuity. Just as a shadow changes with the sun or torchlight, life itself is in constant motion. The dance of shadows became a meditation on these rhythms, a quiet acknowledgement of the cycles of existence. Shadows were also understood as connectors to ancestors and spirits. They could be guides, reminders, or messengers. When dancers moved in ceremonial space, the shadows themselves were thought to carry intentions into realms beyond the material. Ritual observers often interpreted these forms, seeing in them the presence of protective spirits, departed elders, or even deities. The careful interplay of gesture, rhythm, and illumination made the invisible perceptible, creating a layered experience in which every movement carried meaning. The relationship between light, shadow, and movement also influenced architecture and ritual space. Enclosures, sacred grounds, and village layouts were designed to optimize the effects of natural light and firelight. Walls, trees, and reflective surfaces were used to guide shadows, enhance perception, and emphasize symbolic meaning. In this way, space itself became a participant in the ritual, a silent collaborator that shaped understanding and heightened awareness. Light and shadow were not incidental. They were integral, intentional, and imbued with spiritual significance. Observing the interplay of shadows can also inspire reflection on inner life. Our thoughts, emotions, and memories often resemble these shifting forms, some visible, some hidden, some barely perceptible. Tribal teachings suggested that attention to shadows, both external and internal, encouraged mindfulness and self-knowledge. By moving deliberately, by noticing subtleties, humans could attune themselves to the balance of forces around them. The dance of shadow and light became a mirror for inner exploration, a gentle practice in noticing patterns, embracing duality, and understanding the transient nature of all things. Shadow and light together form a continuum, a quiet rhythm that underpins life. Darkness does not exist without illumination, nor is light fully appreciated without contrast. Tribal dances demonstrated this principle physically and spiritually. They reminded participants that balance is essential, that the unseen holds meaning, and that attention to subtlety enriches both understanding and experience. By witnessing and participating in these dances, humans learned to perceive the world in layers, to honor both form and absence, both presence and suggestion. Even now, the lessons of shadows persist. Watching a flame flicker against a wall, noticing the gentle movement of leaves in the morning sun, or observing shapes in water reflections can recall the same attentiveness that tribal communities cultivated. Shadows invite quiet observation, a slowing of thought, and an appreciation for subtlety. They teach that meaning often lies not in what is immediately visible, but in what is suggested, hinted at, or carried lightly beneath the surface as you reflect. Imagine the long lines of dancers, bodies in motion, shadows stretching across ground and wall, light weaving through every gesture. Consider the way these movements held lessons, not only for survival or ceremony, but for understanding life itself, the rhythm of human and spirit, the interplay of past and present, the interdependence of seen and unseen. The dance of shadows and light is more than ritual. It is an enduring meditation, a gentle invitation to recognize patterns, honor duality, and remain attentive to the quiet guidance of the world around you. Perhaps, in watching shadows move, we are reminded that every human act carries consequences that ripple beyond our perception. Each gesture, each choice, is part of a larger choreography, and if we listen carefully, the shadows themselves may whisper a question. What unseen forces are shaping the rhythms of your life, and how might you move in awareness of them? Chapter 5. Totems, Silent Guardians. Totems have always stood in quiet witness. Carved from wood, stone, or bone, they rise from the earth with presence and purpose, neither demanding attention nor fading into the background. Each figure, each animal or form carries a lineage, a thread of memory, spirituality, and guidance that stretches across generations. In tribal cosmologies, totems were never mere decoration. They were guardians, storytellers, and mirrors reflecting the intimate connection between human life and the natural world. Across cultures, totems served as points of spiritual focus. In North America, indigenous communities raised totem poles, not only as family or clan symbols, but also as conduits to ancestral knowledge. Each carving, whether of eagle, bear, or raven, was imbued with meaning. The eagle spoke of vision, the bear of strength and introspection, the raven of transformation and wisdom. These forms were not abstract. They were teachings, quietly suggesting lessons for daily life, ethics, and the cycles of existence. The totem became both silent guide and enduring presence. In other regions, such as the Pacific Northwest and parts of Australia, totems marked territorial, spiritual, and ceremonial significance. They were positioned near water, along paths, or beside sacred sites, reminding observers that every place holds sacred energy. Rituals often took place in proximity to these figures, where dances, chants, and offerings acknowledged the spirit embodied in the totem. Participants understood that totems were alive with ancestral and spiritual essence, mediating between the human and natural worlds. The material of a totem mattered as much as its form. Wood connected the spirit to the forest and growth, stone to permanence and endurance, and bone to mortality and ancestry. Each choice reflected careful consideration of the intended purpose. In some cultures, totems were carved with precise symbolism, embedding genealogies, legends, and spiritual instructions within their surfaces. Observers learned to read the shapes, gestures, and patterns as one reads a story, finding guidance in posture, eye, and form. Totems were also integral to identity. Tribal members saw themselves reflected in the animals, spirits, or symbols their ancestors honored. This identification was not superficial. It cultivated empathy, responsibility, and alignment with the natural and spiritual order. Children learned to respect the traits of their clan's totem. Adults reflected on its guidance, and elders ensured that knowledge persisted. In this way, the totem was both a mirror and a teacher, quietly shaping behavior, values, and understanding. Beyond individual or clan identity, totems played a role in cosmology. They were markers of sacred stories, representing creation myths, seasonal cycles, and moral lessons. In some African tribes, totemic animals were believed to guide humans in agriculture, hunting, and community governance. The owl's presence might encourage vigilance. The serpent's wisdom might instruct caution or adaptability. By embedding ethical and practical knowledge into tangible forms, totems ensured that these lessons were passed from generation to generation without distortion or loss. Even silence was a lesson in itself. Totems rarely spoke, yet their presence conveyed meaning. Their quiet authority demanded attention without force, inviting reflection instead of dictating action. Standing before a totem, one became aware of lineage, responsibility, and the continuity of life. Observers were reminded that human existence is not separate from nature or spirit, that every action resonates beyond the immediate moment, and that understanding often arrives in stillness. Ritual and ceremony further emphasized the sacredness of totems. Offerings were made, dances performed, and chants recited in their presence. Some totems were temporarily adorned for specific events, while others remained unchanged for generations. This duality, permanence, and adaptability mirrored human experience. Life unfolds, yet some principles endure. Totems became anchors in time, guiding individuals and communities as they navigated change and continuity. In some traditions, totems were believed to house protective spirits. Communities placed them at entrances, along paths, or near settlements, trusting that they would ward off harm and maintain harmony. The animals or symbols carved into the totem were not just representations but active presences, offering insight, warning, or protection. In this way, totems bridged the gap between the visible and invisible worlds, suggesting that spirituality is embedded not only in ceremony but also in the landscapes we inhabit. Even the act of creation was a spiritual practice. Carving a totem demanded patience, precision, and intention. The artist engaged with both material and memory, infusing each line, curve, and surface with understanding. This process itself became a meditation, connecting the maker to ancestors, the spirit of the animal or symbol, and the broader rhythms of life. In completing the totem, the community inherited a living record of Kanekana, guide that could endure through years and generations. Totems also encourage reflection on interconnection. They remind us that human life is intertwined with the natural world, that lessons often come from observation, and that guidance may appear in subtle, quiet forms. A carved bear or eagle can be a mentor, a reminder of qualities to nurture within ourselves. A totem invites contemplation. How do we walk with awareness, respect, and alignment in the world? How do our actions ripple beyond the immediate, affecting community, nature, and spirit? Even now, encountering a totem, whether in a museum, a preserved village, or an ancient site, offers a similar experience. The forms, silent and patient, ask nothing but presence. They invite reflection, grounding, and a recognition of continuity. They are reminders that knowledge, wisdom, and protection do not always arrive through speech. Sometimes they arrive in form, posture, and shadow. The totem's presence lingers, offering lessons to those willing to pause and observe. Perhaps the enduring lesson of totems is this: guardianship and guidance do not need to announce themselves loudly. The quiet can carry as much meaning as the visible, the carved form as much wisdom as spoken word. Totems teach patience, reflection, and attentiveness. They invite recognition of the sacredness embedded in life, nature, and ancestry. And if we stand quietly enough, observing and listening, the silent guardians may reveal their message, that unity with life, respect for the natural world, and acknowledgement of ancestral presence are ever within reach, waiting to be noticed. Chapter 6: Songs of the Forgotten Sky. Music has always been more than sound. Among tribal communities, songs served as threads connecting the earthly and the celestial, the mortal and the eternal. In quiet glades, open plains, or near flowing rivers, voices would rise together, carrying melodies that seemed to reach the very stars. These were not merely songs for entertainment, they were instruments of connection, carefully woven into rituals that celebrated creation, cycles of life, and the unseen order of the cosmos. In many indigenous cultures, the sky was alive with significance. Stars were more than points of light. They were markers of time, guides for navigation, and repositories of ancestral knowledge. Songs addressed them directly, rising in harmonies that reflected the motion of celestial bodies, the rhythm of the seasons, and the passage of generations. Each chant, each tone, was an offering and a meditation, a way to align human presence with the vast, enduring patterns above. Anthropologists note that ritual songs often incorporated repetition, call and response, and sustained tones, creating layers of resonance that could be both calming and hypnotic. Among the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, for instance, songlines traced routes across the land and sky simultaneously, embedding geography, history, and lore into melodies. Singing became a form of mapping, a way to carry cultural memory across generations while attuning participants to natural and spiritual rhythms. The voice was both tool and bridge, capable of carrying meaning far beyond the reach of spoken language. In North and South America, similar traditions arose. Drums, flutes, and human voices combined to evoke the sky's vastness, each note echoing patterns seen in the stars. Seasonal ceremonies were accompanied by chants that marked celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, and the appearances of specific constellations. Participants recognized in these patterns an inherent order, a cosmic rhythm that extended both above and below, within the individual and the community. Music became a language through which humans could touch the universal, if only for moments of stillness and presence. The act of singing in these contexts was deliberate and sacred. Breath was measured, posture mindful, and attention focused on both sound and environment. Songs were often performed outdoors, allowing wind, leaves, and the gentle movement of water to join the chorus. In this way, the natural world became part of the composition, each echo and ripple reinforcing the sense that the earthly and celestial are inseparable. Melodies carried across distances, uniting distant participants in shared ritual, and creating an invisible tapestry of sound that connected humans to each other and to the cosmos. The themes of these songs were deeply reflective. They often recounted creation stories, the origins of life, or the deeds of ancestors. In some traditions, the first humans were said to have learned the language of the stars through music, discovering in harmony the order of nature and the patterns of existence. The melodies were slow and deliberate, allowing each listener or participant to absorb meaning. Through this, songs became vessels of memory, preserving cosmology in auditory form, ensuring that knowledge survived even when written records were absent. Rhythm was as significant as melody. Drumming, clapping, and chanting created cycles that mirrored both earthly and celestial movements. Long sequences of beats echoed the pulse of the human heart, the flow of rivers, and the orbit of celestial bodies. Music became a way to synchronize with life itself, to feel time not as an abstract measure, but as a lived experience. Observers and participants were drawn into these rhythms, sensing in their own bodies the harmony between human and universe, between individual and collective. Even silence was part of the music. Pauses within chants, spaces between notes, and moments of stillness allowed reflection. In these quiet intervals, listeners could sense the subtle currents of meaning, the weight of ancestral presence, and the breath of the cosmos itself. The absence of sound became as meaningful as the song, inviting contemplation and attunement. It reminded participants that understanding is often found in listening, not only in performing or observing. The songs also fostered community and identity. They were passed down orally, creating continuity across generations. Young members learned to sing alongside elders, absorbing not only the melodies but also the teachings embedded within them. Through repetition and practice, individuals internalized the rhythms of their people, aligning themselves with both history and spiritual tradition. Music became a medium for education, devotion, and connection, an audible form of guidance that shaped behavior, perception, and understanding beyond practical instruction. These songs inspired reflection on human life and place in the cosmos. Listeners were invited to consider the vastness above, the patterns of movement, and the persistence of cycles. As voices rose and fell, so did thoughts drift toward the infinite. The sky itself became a canvas for contemplation. Each star a point of reference, each melody a thread linking earth to heavens, human to divine, past to future. In this gentle, immersive practice, participants glimpsed the silent order of the universe, learning that harmony is found not only in sound but in awareness. In modern times, the echoes of these songs endure. Field recordings, preserved chants, and ceremonial practices continue to carry ancestral melodies across continents and generations. They remind us that music is a vehicle for memory, a bridge between worlds, and a tool for reflection. Even when removed from its original context, the cadence of ritual song can calm, focus, and inspire, inviting listeners to inhabit the space between earth and sky. Listening to these melodies invites personal reflection. We might notice our own breath aligning with rhythm, or our minds tracing patterns like constellations. We might wonder at the continuity of human curiosity, the universal impulse to reach upward, to connect with what is greater than ourselves. In the quiet of night, with stars overhead, these songs become more than sound. They become companions, guides, and reminders of the deep, enduring relationships between humans, nature, and the cosmos. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the songs of the forgotten sky is that sound carries memory and intention, that rhythm and tone can align the human spirit with the universe, and that even in silence or stillness, the echoes of these melodies persist. If we listen carefully, allowing the music to guide attention and reflection, we may feel the pulse of the stars themselves, and recognize that every note, every breath, and every pause is part of a greater cosmic harmony. Chapter 7. The Language of Stones. Stones have always spoken, though in whispers, measured by patience and attention. Across tribal landscapes, boulders, standing stones, and carved rocks marked more than territory. They held memory. They recorded lineage, myth, and lore, preserving knowledge long before written language. Each stone was a witness, a silent guide, and a repository of time, connecting the living to the past and the unseen. In their stillness, they reminded communities that permanence carries both presence and responsibility. In many ancient societies, stones were placed with intention. Circles, alignments, and solitary markers signaled sacred spaces, gathering points, or boundaries. In Europe, standing stones aligned with solstices or celestial events spoke of astronomical awareness and ritual precision. The stones themselves became instruments of observation, shaping perception of the sun, moon, and stars, while embedding spiritual meaning within daily life. Communities engaged with these formations, performing ceremonies, pilgrimages, and rites that acknowledged both cosmic order and ancestral memory. Symbols carved into rock conveyed stories and laws. In North America, petroglyphs captured visions, hunting scenes, and spiritual beliefs. In Australia, Aboriginal rock engravings traced ancestral journeys and creation myths, communicating complex cosmology to those who approached with respect and attentiveness. Stones were not passive. They were communicative. Their shapes, markings, and placement served as messages, teaching through presence, form, and context. Observers learned to read the land, attuning their minds to the rhythms and lessons encoded within these silent sentinels. Beyond marking sacred spaces, stones functioned as practical guides, Pilgrimage paths, for instance, were often lined with stones that indicated direction, distance, or ritual significance. Travelers followed these markers, guided not only by sight, but by understanding of the stories embedded within the rocks. The act of moving between stones became a meditative journey, each step aligned with reflection, memory, and attentiveness to the land's energy. Stones, in this way, bridged navigation with spiritual experience, reminding humans that journey and meaning are inseparable. The tactile quality of stones also mattered. Smooth river rocks invited touch and reflection. Rough, jagged boulders commanded caution and respect. Carved surfaces, etched by ancestors, offered lessons in patience and reverence. In some cultures, stones were used in rituals to communicate with spirits, calling upon protection, guidance, or healing. The solidity of stone provided grounding, a physical connection to the earth, reminding participants that spirituality is often anchored in tangible reality, as much as in vision or prayer, ritual. Placement of stones reinforced social and spiritual order. Tribal communities might arrange stones in circles, align them with astronomical events, or cluster them to honor particular deities or ancestors. These arrangements encouraged collective participation, creating spaces where observation, movement, and reflection intertwined. Ceremonial acts around stones, gathering, dancing, or offering strengthened bonds between individuals and the larger patterns of life, reminding all participants that the sacred is often found in interaction with enduring forms. Stones also taught lessons through stillness. Unlike fire or song, their presence is unmoving, patient, and silent. In observing them, one learns attentiveness, endurance, and humility. Communities understood that listening to stone requires slowing down, aligning senses, and considering history beyond personal memory. Stones preserve stories older than human recollection, demonstrating continuity across generations. They suggest that wisdom does not always arrive swiftly, but through careful observation, reflection, and respect for what has endured. In many traditions, stones were believed to carry spiritual energy. Shamanic practices often involve seeking guidance from particular rocks, interpreting their shapes, patterns, or resonance. Some stones were associated with protection, others with fertility or transformation. The presence of these stones anchored the intangible into the tangible, giving form to abstract concepts like ancestry, fate, and cosmic order. By approaching stones with attention, communities accessed subtle knowledge embedded in the environment itself. Even in modern times, the lessons of stones persist. Archaeological sites, preserved sacred grounds, and natural formations remind us that the landscape carries memory, intention, and guidance. Observing stones today, whether standing silently in a field or carved with ancient symbols, can inspire reflection on our own relationship with time, memory, and permanence. They invite awareness of cycles, interconnectedness, and the subtle forces shaping life. Stones teach that stillness is not emptiness. It is present, continuity, and quiet instruction. Ultimately, the language of stones invites contemplation on human existence in harmony with the world. Each rock, boulder, or marker asks for attention and respect, reminding us that wisdom is often encoded in form, placement, and endurance. The voice of the earth is not spoken loudly. It is embedded in the textures, alignments, and stories of stone. In listening, we become aware of rhythm, history, and the patient guidance offered to those who pause long enough to perceive it. Perhaps If we remain still and attentive, we can sense the stories held within each stone, the silent guardians of time and memory. Their quiet presence encourages reflection on how human life, nature, and spirit are intertwined. The lessons of stone remind us that the earth itself is alive with history, wisdom, and guidance, waiting patiently for those who are willing to listen. Chapter 8: Spirits of the Hunt. In the rhythm of ancient life, hunting was more than a practical necessity. It was a sacred dialogue between humans and the animal world, a careful negotiation that acknowledged the interdependence of life. Each hunter understood that the act of taking a life carried responsibility, respect, and a deep awareness of the cycle that binds all beings. In these traditions, the hunt was an ethical and spiritual practice, guided by principles that balanced survival with reverence. Among tribal communities across continents, rituals preceded every hunt. Hunters would offer prayers to spirits, asking permission to enter the forest or step upon the plains. They acknowledged the presence of the animals, the land, and the unseen guardians who oversaw the boundaries between life and death. In North America, indigenous hunters often engaged in ceremonies honoring the spirits of the deer, elk, or bison, offering thanks even before the arrow was drawn. The act of recognition ensured that each life taken became part of a sacred exchange, rather than a mere transaction of necessity. This perspective was not isolated. In Africa, hunters in certain communities performed rites to seek guidance from ancestral spirits and to ask forgiveness for the life they intended to claim. Ritual objects, chants, and symbolic gestures accompanied the journey, creating a space in which humans could attune themselves to the land and the creatures that sustained them. The hunt was understood as partnership, a collaboration in which humans relied on the wisdom, speed, and presence of the animals they pursued. The ethical framework surrounding hunting extended beyond ceremony. Many cultures emphasized restraint, observation, and careful choice. Only what was needed was taken, ensuring that balance remained intact. Young hunters were trained in patience and respect, learning that skill was intertwined with responsibility. Stories, passed orally, reinforced these lessons, highlighting the dangers of arrogance and the rewards of humility. Through these teachings, hunting became not only a means of sustenance, but a school for character, ethics, and spiritual attunement. Gratitude was central to the practice. The act of honoring the life given, of acknowledging its sacrifice, was woven into every step. In some traditions, hunters spoke directly to the animal, offering words of thanks and promises to honor its gift. They used all parts of the creature, leaving nothing to waste. The ritual consumption of meat, the sharing of resources with family and community, and the careful return of bones or remains to the earth reinforced the sacredness of the act. The hunt became a cycle of giving and receiving, teaching interconnectedness and respect for the living world. Animal spirits were often perceived as guides and teachers. The deer might teach swiftness and awareness, the eagle, vision and patience, the wolf, cooperation and strategy. In entering the hunt, humans engaged in a form of dialogue, observing behaviors and rhythms, learning not only survival but insight into the qualities that sustain life. The forest, the plains, and the mountains became classrooms where observation was as important as action, and stillness as important as movement. Stories and myths reinforced the sacred nature of the hunt. In many Native American traditions, trickster figures or guardian spirits were invoked to explain the moral dimensions of taking life. African hunter myths often recount ancestral animals who guide, test, or instruct humans. These narratives conveyed both practical and spiritual lessons, teaching that hunting without respect invites imbalance, misfortune, or spiritual estrangement. They reminded communities that the act of killing carries consequences beyond the immediate moment, threading together ethics, survival, and cosmology. The rituals surrounding hunting also created deep community bonds. Groups traveled together, shared responsibilities, and observed protocols that ensured cohesion and mutual care. Songs, prayers, and chants accompanied the hunt, fostering mindfulness and reinforcing the awareness that human actions ripple through the web of life. The journey itself, whether through dense forest or across open plains, became a form of meditation, a way to synchronize human intent with the rhythm of nature. Even the preparation and tools of hunting were treated with reverence. Arrows, spears, and traps were often consecrated, painted, or decorated with symbols of protection, guidance, or ancestral blessing. Hunters approached their instruments not as mere objects, but as extensions of the body, mind, and spirit. Each act, from drawing the bow to releasing the arrow, was deliberate, mindful, and steeped in acknowledgement of the living essence of the animal and the broader cycles of life. After the hunt, reflection remained central. Feasts were often accompanied by words of gratitude and stories recounting the lessons of the pursuit. Elders emphasized the balance of life and death, the continuation of cycles, and the human responsibility to protect and sustain the world that had provided sustenance. Ceremonial cleansing or symbolic gestures might follow, returning energy to the earth and ensuring harmony between the human and natural realms. Hunting, in this way, was never a solitary act. It existed as a relationship between hunter and hunted, human and spirit, present and ancestral. The ethics, rituals, and observations embedded in these practices ensured that life was honored, wisdom transmitted, and community sustained. Participation in the hunt became a practice in humility, awareness, and gratitude, a reflection of the understanding that all life is interwoven and that every action carries consequence. Perhaps the quietest lesson of the hunt is that life and death are inseparable, and that respect and intention transform necessity into sacred partnership. When we consider the hunters of the past, we are reminded that ethical practice, mindfulness, and gratitude are as essential now as they were in the ancient forest and plains. The spirits of the hunt linger in memory, teaching that every act of taking, giving, and observing can be approached with reverence, balance, and quiet reflection. Chapter 9. Sacred Circles of Gathering. From the earliest settlements to the open plains, the circle has held a special place in human consciousness. Its unbroken form represents continuity, unity, and the quiet rhythm of life. For tribal communities, circles were more than shapes. They were sacred spaces, carefully arranged to foster connection between people, the earth, and the spiritual world. Whether formed by stones, fire, or simply the arrangement of bodies, circles became focal points of ritual, reflection, and shared experience. In ceremonial grounds, circles defined boundaries and intentions. They marked areas where rituals could unfold, where participants could gather in equality, and where the energies of the earth and sky could be acknowledged. Anthropologists have noted that circular arrangements encourage a sense of inclusion and attentiveness, creating a natural symmetry that mirrors cycles in nature. The rising and setting of the sun, the phases of the moon, and the patterns of seasons. Through these shapes, humans aligned themselves with larger rhythms, both visible and unseen. Fire circles were among the most widespread forms of gathering. Flames placed at the center served as both practical and symbolic anchors. The warmth illuminated faces, casting gentle shadows, while the crackle of embers offered a natural cadence for chanting, storytelling, and reflection. Around these fires, communities reinforced their collective memory, recounted histories, and passed down teachings. The circle ensured that each voice could be heard, that each presence was acknowledged, and that the energy of the group flowed harmoniously. Stone circles and other permanent arrangements carried deeper layers of meaning. In Europe, Neolithic monuments like Stonehenge exemplify how humans have long used circular structures to track celestial cycles, mark sacred times, and connect with ancestral forces. In Africa and the Americas, smaller, community-focused circles guided daily gatherings, seasonal ceremonies, and rites of passage. Each circle, whether monumental or intimate, invited contemplation of the infinite and offered a physical reminder that life moves in repeating patterns, linking past, present, and future within the circle. Social dynamics were also expressed. The egalitarian nature of circular gatherings emphasized inclusion. No single position dominated, and each individual could participate fully. Rituals often required movement within the circle, reinforcing bonds between participants and cultivating awareness of shared responsibility. Songs, dances, and spoken words echoed across the circle, blending voices into collective harmony. Through these practices, humans experienced the tangible benefits of spatial geometry, focus, balance, and cohesion, both spiritually and communally. Circles were also symbolic mirrors of natural cycles. The sun's daily journey, the lunar phases, and the repeating rhythms of planting and harvest were encoded in ritual actions performed within these forms. Tribal members recognized in the circle a reflection of life itself, continuous, cyclical, and interconnected. The geometry of the circle encouraged mindfulness, inviting participants to contemplate the flow of time, the persistence of ancestral presence, and the patterns that shape existence. Rituals in circles were rarely hurried. Movements were deliberate, voices modulated, and gestures mindful. Whether it was the passing of sacred objects, offerings to ancestors, or silent meditation, the circle served as a frame within which participants could focus inward while remaining attuned to the community and the environment. In this dual awareness, inner calm and collective harmony were nurtured simultaneously, creating a space where reflection and connection were inseparable. Children learned from circles as well. From early age, they observed gatherings, listened to elders, and eventually participated in the choreography of ritual. The shape itself taught lessons in unity and patience. One learns through repetition, through walking along the perimeter, through joining hands, or following the turns of ceremonial dancers. In this way, sacred circles became tools of cultural transmission, embedding ethics, history, and spirituality into both mind and body. Even today, the lessons of sacred circles resonate. Modern meditation groups, community gatherings, and ceremonial practices often mirror these ancient geometries, consciously or instinctively. Circles remind us of the importance of inclusion, continuity, and rhythm. They provide a gentle template for reflection, offering both structure and openness. A space where the boundaries of self soften while the sense of shared presence deepens. Perhaps the most enduring quality of circles is their quiet invitation to contemplation. In their embrace, time seems to slow, attention sharpens, and awareness expands. They teach that harmony is cultivated through positioning, intention, and attentiveness. In standing or sitting within a circle, humans touch a form that has been honored across millennia, unbroken, eternal, and guiding. And as we pause within such a shape, we are reminded that life itself, in its cycles and connections, carries its own sacred geometry, waiting for us to perceive it with patience and reverence. Chapter 10. The Veil of Dreams, in the Quiet of Night. When the world slows and shadows lengthen, dreams emerge as subtle threads connecting the mortal and the unseen. For tribal communities, dreams were not merely the wandering of the mind, they were portals. Sacred spaces where spirits spoke, where guidance could be received, and where the collective memory of a people whispered softly to the sleeping soul. Across cultures, dreams were treated with reverence, recognized as a bridge between waking life and the mysteries that shaped existence. Dreams often carried messages. They were interpreted as guidance for daily life, for hunting, for relationships, and for spiritual growth. In some Native American traditions, dreamers might record visions through symbols, songs, or stories, then share them with elders who could decipher meaning and provide context. These interpretations were not casual. They were woven into the ethical, practical, and spiritual framework of the community, ensuring that dreams served both the individual and the collective. The significance of dreams extended beyond guidance. In many societies, dreams were seen as opportunities to encounter ancestors, spirit guides, or deities. Shamans, elders, and spiritual leaders trained themselves to navigate the veil of dreams with awareness, using rituals to invite clarity and to protect the dreamer from harmful influences. They understood that dreams could reveal threats, offer healing, or disclose paths yet unseen. In this way, dreams became living dialogues, a nocturnal language spoken between the material and spiritual worlds. Ritual practices surrounding dreams were varied and intentional. Before sleep, individuals might engage in cleansing ceremonies, light fires, or recite prayers and chants to honor spirits and prepare the mind. Certain herbs or natural scents were used to open perception, inviting messages to emerge in the quiet hours. These practices framed dreams not as random images, but as purposeful experiences, capable of carrying lessons, warnings, or encouragement from realms beyond immediate sight. Dream interpretation relied on a rich interplay of symbolism, personal experience, and collective wisdom. Animals, landscapes, and natural elements appearing in dreams were understood as guides. The appearance of a particular bird might signal foresight or vigilance. A river could represent emotional flow and transition. By observing these signs, communities cultivated an awareness that life is threaded with symbolic meaning, and that attentive listening can reveal guidance hidden in plain sight. In some cultures, communal dream sharing deepened connection. Individuals recounted visions to trusted members, who in turn provided insight or collective interpretation. This practice reinforced a sense of unity, reminding the dreamer that personal experience is always linked to a broader social and spiritual fabric. By treating dreams as shared phenomena, communities ensured that wisdom, caution, and inspiration circulated freely, enriching both individual insight and collective understanding. Dreams were also spaces for problem-solving and innovation. Tribal leaders might seek answers to questions about survival, strategy, or healing through dream consultation. The unconscious mind, intertwined with spiritual observation, offered solutions that waking logic alone could not provide. In these nocturnal journeys, humans explored scenarios, rehearsed decisions, and glimpsed possibilities beyond immediate perception. Dreams, then, were both reflective and generative, guiding action through subtle revelation. Certain dreams were considered sacred initiations. In rites of passage, young members of the community might be encouraged to undertake nocturnal fasts, isolation, or vigil, awaiting visions that would confirm readiness for adult responsibilities. These experiences connected personal transformation with cosmic patterns, framing growth as inseparable from the rhythms of nature and ancestral wisdom. The veil of sleep became a classroom where insight and responsibility were taught in symbols, images, and feelings rather than words. Across regions, specific dream objects or locations were believed to enhance connection with the spirit world. Sacred groves, rivers, and mountain sites were sometimes visited before sleep, offering grounding and protection. The environment itself was seen as a participant in the dream process, lending its energies to facilitate clarity, inspiration, and communion with unseen guides. Such practices reinforce the understanding that the human mind, body, and surrounding world are inseparable in shaping spiritual experience. Even the recording of dreams carried importance. Notebooks, carvings, or oral retellings captured visions for reflection and for guidance of future generations. The act of remembering and sharing strengthened the link between individual experience and collective knowledge, ensuring that dreams were not ephemeral, but enduring vessels of insight. Through this attentiveness, tribal communities cultivated a culture in which nocturnal journeys were honored as essential pathways to wisdom, healing, and balance in the quiet, private realm of sleep. Dreams remind us that knowledge often comes without force, that guidance can arrive softly, and that awareness extends beyond conscious control. They invite the dreamer to slow down, to observe, and to consider life from perspectives not immediately visible. By honoring dreams, tribal societies acknowledged the subtle currents of existence, the invisible rhythms guiding behavior, morality, and connection with both the living and the departed. Perhaps the most profound quality of dreams is their gentle insistence that life is that understanding requires patience, and that wisdom can come in forms both silent and fleeting. As we let our minds drift, we touch the same veil that guided ancestors, connecting with voices, images, and insights that have traveled across generations. And in that quiet, nocturnal space, we are reminded that the world of dreams is as real as the waking world, and as full of guidance, reflection, and silent teaching. Chapter 11. Healing Hands and Sacred Herbs. In the quiet spaces of forests, plains, and mountains, tribal communities discovered a delicate balance between observation, ritual, and reverence. Healing was never approached as mere technique or accidental discovery. It was a sacred practice, rooted in mindfulness and deep connection to the natural world. Every plant, root, and mineral was recognized as more than a material substance. Each carried its own essence, a presence that could be felt, respected, and carefully integrated into ceremonies of restoration. The act of healing began with attentiveness. Healers observed the environment, noting which plants thrived in which seasons, how animals interacted with certain roots or leaves, and how the body responded to natural remedies. Knowledge was passed orally through apprenticeship and guided experience, ensuring that each generation could read the subtle messages encoded in the land. The practice was both science and spirit, combining empirical understanding with recognition of unseen forces. Sacred herbs held special significance. Leaves of sage, bundles of sweetgrass, roots of ginseng, and barks of particular trees were selected not only for their medicinal qualities, but for their spiritual resonance. The preparation of these remedies often involved ritual, chants, prayers, or offerings were used to honor the plant, to ask permission for its use, and to align the healer's intention with the restorative power inherent in the material. Through this careful attentiveness, healing became a dialogue, not a transaction, a conversation between the human, the plant, and the energies that connected them. Healing ceremonies extended beyond the physical body. Tribal medicine acknowledged that illness could emerge from imbalance in spirit, mind, or social relationships, as well as in flesh. Rituals might include cleansing with smoke, water, or symbolic gestures, guided meditation or song, and participation of the community in reaffirming harmony. These practices reinforce the understanding that health is a holistic state, sustained by respectful interaction with nature, community, and oneself. The hands of healers were both tools and conduits. Touch was used carefully, whether in massage, application of salves, or the laying on of hands. Each motion was deliberate, attuned to the energy of the patient, and supported by knowledge of anatomy, plant properties, and spiritual practice. Through this gentle contact, healers helped restore balance, channeling focus, intention, and compassion into every action. Observation remained central. The healer noted changes in color, temperature, and expression. Signs of discomfort, relief, or emotional tension were interpreted as indicators not only of the body's response, but of the patient's connection to the spiritual or emotional dimensions of health. Over time, tribal healers developed an intuitive sense, linking sensory information with ancestral knowledge, and discerning the most appropriate interventions for each individual communities. Recognized that healing could not be rushed. Patience was intrinsic to the process, allowing plants to be gathered at optimal times, remedies to be prepared carefully, and the patient's body and spirit to respond naturally. Ceremony provided rhythm, the timing of application, the words spoken, and the presence of others all contributed to an environment in which healing could unfold gently and harmoniously. In some traditions, certain herbs or remedies were reserved for rites of passage or initiation. Their use symbolized purification, transition, and the opening of new states of awareness. The preparation and administration of these sacred substances carried lessons beyond the body: humility, respect, and attentiveness. The act of healing, therefore, was inseparable from ethical and spiritual cultivation. Through these practices, tribal medicine preserved a profound understanding of connection. The land offered guidance, the plants carried wisdom, and the healer acted as a bridge between natural and human worlds. Illness was reframed as an imbalance to be gently restored, rather than a threat to be fought, emphasizing the delicate harmony between body, spirit, and environment. The legacy of these practices continues to inspire. Modern herbal medicine, holistic approaches, and mindfulness-based therapies echo the principles long upheld in tribal traditions: observation, intention, ritual, and respect for life in all its forms. By honoring the sacred in the act of healing, communities cultivated not only physical restoration, but also a sense of ethical and spiritual continuity. Perhaps the most enduring lesson is the subtle reminder that every touch, every gathered root, and every ritual gesture carries intention. Healing is as much about presence, attentiveness, and respect as it is about any material remedy. In the quiet unfolding of these practices, we are invited to consider how our own hands, intentions, and daily choices might restore balance, not only to our bodies, but to the wider web of life in which we are inseparably connected. Chapter 12. The Storyteller's Whisper. In the quiet corners of tribal villages, by fires that flickered and shadows that danced, the elders and shamans spoke with a deliberate softness. Their words were carefully chosen, carrying both clarity and depth, weaving threads of history, morality, and cosmology into narratives that nourished the mind and spirit. Storytelling was not merely entertainment. It was a sacred act, a transmission of wisdom from one generation to the next, a gentle pulse that connected past, present, and future. Oral tradition was the living memory of a people. Without written records, every word mattered, every inflection carried meaning. Stories recounted the deeds of ancestors, the origins of the world, and the delicate relationships between humans, animals, and spirits. Through these narratives, listeners learned about the cycles of nature, the ethical codes of the community, and the unseen forces that shaped existence. In this way, storytelling was both educational and spiritual, offering guidance while cultivating imagination and reflection. Shamans, in particular, held a unique role as mediators between realms. Their stories often conveyed lessons from the unseen, shared visions from dreams, and instructions for ritual practice. The cadence of their speech mirrored the rhythms of nature, the rise and fall of a river, the whisper of wind through leaves, the gradual passing of the seasons. Listeners, attuned to these subtleties, learned not only the content of the story, but also the value of patience, attentiveness, and reverence. Stories were often layered. A single narrative could contain multiple meanings, revealing moral instruction, cosmological insight, or practical guidance, depending on the listener's stage of life. Elders might tell of a great flood, not merely as a tale of destruction, but as a lesson in preparation, respect for natural forces, and the consequences of imbalance. Through repeated hearing, stories became internalized, forming frameworks for ethical reasoning, personal reflection, and communal harmony. The act of listening was as important as the act of speaking. Children and adults alike gathered in circles, their attention focused, absorbing the cadence, the pauses, the emphasis, and the nuance. Silence between words allowed reflection, while repetition reinforced understanding. Storytelling cultivated mindfulness, training listeners to discern subtle cues, recognize symbolic patterns, and connect with the larger web of life in which they participated, beyond morality and history. Storytellers also nurtured imagination and emotional depth. Tales of spirits, animals, and other worlds invited listeners to explore realms beyond the immediate, to consider perspectives not their own, and to understand the mysteries that shaped human experience. Through these whispers, the unseen became approachable, not frightening, and the unknown was transformed into a source of guidance, wonder, and reflection. Ceremonial storytelling often involved ritual. Objects might be passed between participants, songs or chants interspersed with narration, and gestures used to mark key moments. These enhancements did more than decorate the tales. They reinforced meaning, created rhythm, and fostered a sense of sacred participation. Listeners felt included, as though the story unfolded not only in the mind but across space, uniting community, environment, and spiritual presence, even in solitary moments. The echoes of storytelling shaped thought and behavior. The soft cadence of remembered tales could guide decisions, offer comfort or suggest caution. By preserving wisdom through oral tradition, communities ensured that knowledge was alive, flexible, and adaptable, capable of guiding each individual in ways written texts alone cannot achieve. Perhaps the most subtle gift of the storytellers, whisper, is the reminder that wisdom often travels gently, arriving in forms that invite reflection rather than dictate action. Through listening carefully, we learn to perceive the world with attentiveness, to recognize patterns, and to honor the voices of those who came before us. And in this quiet, shared act of hearing, the soft wind of stories carries forward, shaping minds and hearts with enduring grace. Chapter 13. The Eternal Forest. In the heart of the natural world, forests have always stood as living temples. Each tree, each moss-covered stone, and each rustling leaf carried significance beyond its material presence. For tribal communities, these forests were not simply resources or landscapes. They were sacred spaces imbued with spirit and history. Walking beneath the canopy, one could feel the rhythm of life itself, the silent pulse of interconnected existence, a reminder that humans were part of a much larger, breathing system. Forests shaped the spiritual and practical lives of the people who lived within or near them. Paths through dense groves became pilgrimage routes, places where individuals might meditate, seek guidance, or commune with unseen forces. The very act of entering the forest was ritualized steps taken with awareness, offerings made to honor the spirits dwelling in trees or undergrowth. In these movements, the line between daily life and spiritual practice blurred, revealing a gentle harmony between human intention and natural presence. Every tree held memory. Rings of growth marked years of survival, storms weathered, and sunlight captured. Tribal communities recognized these markers as symbols, teaching patience, endurance, and respect for cycles of life. Certain trees were considered sacred, their wood, leaves, or sap reserved for ceremonial use. By tending to the forest with care, avoiding unnecessary harm, planting new life, and maintaining balance, humans participated in an ongoing dialogue with nature, one that emphasized reciprocity rather than dominance. The forest also served as a classroom of observation. Hunters, gatherers, and healers learned from its rhythms, the timing of fruiting, the migration of birds, the emergence of medicinal plants. These observations were intertwined with spiritual practice. Noticing subtle changes in the environment was considered a way to attune oneself to the unseen, energies that influenced human life. Wisdom arose not only from written instruction, but from listening, seeing, and walking mindfully within this sacred, living classroom. Rituals performed within forests often reflected this symbiosis. Ceremonies to honor the spirits of trees, to give thanks for the harvest, or to seek guidance were conducted with deliberate stillness. Participants might circle a grove, chant in harmony with wind through branches, or place offerings at the base of ancient trees. Each gesture, each step, was intended to recognize the forest's agency, its presence as a silent partner in life and survival. In this way, the forest itself became a teacher, revealing lessons in humility, patience, and interconnectedness. The sensory experience of the forest reinforced its sacred role. Sunlight filtered through leaves, dappling the earth in shifting patterns of light and shadow. The scent of damp soil, the sound of water trickling over rocks, the subtle movements of small creatures all conveyed layers of meaning. Tribal members learned to perceive these cues as messages, insights into timing, cycles, and appropriate action. Even the quietest moments carried instruction, reminding humans that attentiveness and reflection were as important as any spoken teaching. Forests also symbolized continuity and eternity. Their slow growth contrasted with human transience, and their cycles of decay and regeneration reflected broader cosmological principles. Tribal cosmologies often incorporated trees as sacred anchors, connecting the underworld, the earthly plane, and the sky above. Rituals in these spaces emphasized balance not only within the self, but within the community and with the wider web of life. Humans, plants, and animals were understood as interdependent, each action resonating beyond the immediate, influencing future generations. Beyond practical and ceremonial importance, forests inspired reflection. Sitting quietly beneath the canopy, one might sense the subtle presence of ancestors, lingering in leaves or wind. Time itself seemed to stretch, allowing inner thoughts to settle and awareness to expand. In these moments, the forest offered lessons in stillness, patience, and receptivity. It invited contemplation, showing that spiritual understanding is often found in observation and quiet interaction rather than in words or overt action. Perhaps the most enduring wisdom of the eternal forest is its reminder of connection. Humans are not separate from the worlds they inhabit. They are threads in a vast, interwoven tapestry of life. Every tree, root, and stone is a participant in this sacred ecology. By honoring the forest through careful observation, ritualized action, and mindful respect, tribal communities cultivated not only practical survival, but a deeper sense of harmony, reverence, and belonging. And in this quiet, living temple, the forest continues to whisper to those who listen. Patience, reciprocity, and reflection are as vital to life as breath, and the lessons carried by trees endure long after individual lives have passed. Chapter 14. Ancestors' shadowed paths across forests, plains, and mountains. Ancient paths trace the steps of those who came before. These trails were more than practical routes from one settlement to another. They were living maps of memory and devotion. Every footfall echoed the rhythms of ancestors, and walking these paths became an act of connection, a way of moving alongside generations long past. For tribal communities, paths held the sacred imprint of time itself, guiding not only movement across land but the inner journey of reflection and reverence. Pilgrimage was a central practice. Some trails led to sacred groves, water sources, or stone circles, each chosen for its spiritual significance. Travelers approached these journeys with intention, mindful of the land and of the spirits that lingered along the way. Offerings might be left at junctions or at specific marker stones, carved posts, or naturally significant trees acknowledging the presence of ancestors and the wisdom embedded in the terrain. The act of walking itself was ritualized, steps measured and deliberate, each stride an acknowledgement of continuity and respect. The physical contours of the land informed the spiritual narrative of these paths. Hills, rivers, and valleys were not merely obstacles or landmarks. They were stages in a story, each requiring attention, endurance, and humility. Crossing a river could symbolize purification. Ascending a hill might mark insight gained, and entering a shaded forest could signify entering the unknown, a space for inner reflection. In moving through the landscape, travelers mirrored their spiritual journey inward, attuning to lessons embedded in nature, life, and community. Some trails connected settlements, linking villages and clans across generations. Oral histories often preserved the significance of these routes, recounting journeys of great leaders, initiates, or revered healers. Stories were told of spirits who lingered at crossroads, guiding or testing travelers. These tales offered guidance for those on the trail, suggesting conduct, mindfulness, and respect. Walking such paths was a lesson in attentiveness, patience, and the acknowledgement that life's journey is inseparable from the paths forged by those who came. Before sacred trails were also spaces for communal gathering. Festivals, seasonal migrations, and rites of passage often incorporated processions along these paths. Participants moved together, their steps and chants resonating with the energy of the land and the presence of the ancestors. In these moments, the paths themselves seemed to breathe, holding the collective rhythm of community, the history of movement, and the subtle presence of those who had walked before. Markers along the trails served as silent teachers. Carved stones, standing posts, or worn depressions in the earth were reminders of human and spiritual passage. Observing these details cultivated mindfulness, a recognition that the land is storied and alive. Travelers learned to read the landscape as one reads a sacred text, interpreting signs, patterns, and histories embedded in natural and man-made features. Each journey became a meditation, teaching humility, patience, and reflection. The paths also symbolized continuity and cyclical movement, just as rivers return to the sea and seasons repeat their rhythm. Human steps along these trails reaffirmed connection across generations. Pilgrimage and ritual walking reminded communities that life is part of a greater pattern, where the actions of the living honor the legacy of the dead and prepare the way for those yet to come. Every journey, no matter how small, carried the weight of history and the gentle guidance of ancestral presence. In contemplating these shadowed paths, one may sense that the world itself is stitched together by movement, memory, and reverence. Walking the trails of ancestors teaches that every step is both literal and symbolic, a practice in mindfulness, respect, and intimate connection with the continuum of life. The shadows along the path are not to be feared. They are companions, echoes of those who have gone before, inviting reflection, gratitude, and quiet understanding. Chapter 15. The Gift of Rain. Rain was never merely water falling from the sky. For countless tribal communities, it was a sacred pulse, a rhythm that connected the heavens to the earth, the living to the unseen. Each drop carried both life and memory, nourishing crops, filling streams, and softening the soil, while also reminding humans of their place within a vast and delicate balance. Rain became a messenger of the divine, an ever-present collaborator in the cycles of survival, reflection, and spiritual awareness. Many tribes developed rituals to honor the coming of rain, blending practical preparation with reverence. Ceremonies often coincided with the first seasonal storms, a recognition that the clouds themselves held power and intention. Drums, chants, and songs would rise to meet the sky, not as demands, but as offerings of respect and gratitude. Participants moved in measured patterns, feet stamping in rhythm with the falling drops, hands lifted in acknowledgement of the gifts carried on each drop. The sound of rain itself became part of the ritual, a gentle percussion that wove itself into the human heartbeat, reminding all that life and divinity moved in tandem. These practices were not uniform, for each landscape and culture found its own expression. In arid regions, rain ceremonies carried deep longing and solemn hope, with dances performed over parched earth, invoking clouds and winds with careful gestures. In wetter lands, festivals of rain might be celebratory, honoring abundance and shared sustenance. Regardless of the form, the underlying principle remained the same. Rain was sacred, and human acknowledgement of it was both a moral and spiritual act. The interplay of gratitude and ritual extended beyond the ceremony itself. Tribes observed the patterns of rainfall, learning to read the clouds, wind, and humidity as subtle messages. Elders would teach when to sow and when to harvest, interpreting the earth's responses as guidance from the spirits. In this way, survival and spirituality intertwined seamlessly, each moment a lesson in patience, observation, and respect. Through attentiveness to rain, people cultivated a quiet mindfulness, understanding that life's sustenance arrives not only through effort but through openness to the forces beyond immediate control. Rain also served as a mirror for inner reflection. The gentle tapping of drops on leaves, stones, or rooftops invited contemplation. Many rituals included periods of stillness, where participants would sit beneath open skies, feeling the cool touch of rain, listening to its murmurs, and letting thoughts drift in harmony with its rhythm. In such moments, the boundary between the human and the divine seemed to dissolve. Rain became a teacher of presence, of impermanence, and of trust in the cycles that shape existence. The sacredness of rain extended into myths and oral traditions. Stories spoke of deities who controlled clouds, spirits who danced in storms, and ancestors who taught humans the first songs of gratitude when the first droplets fell. These narratives carried both moral guidance and ecological wisdom, emphasizing stewardship of the land and harmony with natural rhythms. By framing rainfall as a divine gift, communities cultivated reverence for the environment, a practice that intertwined survival with ethical responsibility. Observing the rain also reinforced the communal fabric. Ceremonies often brought together villages, connecting individuals in shared acknowledgement of the sky's generosity. The collective experience of singing, dancing, and witnessing the life-giving rain fostered unity and empathy, reminding all that no single person controls the seasons, but everyone shares in their blessings. Children would learn from elders not only the practicalities of farming and water use, but the deeper rhythm of humility and gratitude that underpinned the ritual. Even after ceremonies ended, the lessons of rain lingered. Fields glistened with moisture, rivers swelled, and the earth exhaled a freshness that carried the memory of ritual into everyday life. Humans became attentive to smaller showers, brief storms, and morning mists, understanding that the sacred can appear in subtle forms. Each encounter with rain was an invitation to pause, reflect, and recognize the invisible threads that bind life, land, and spirit. In contemplating the gift of rain, one might consider how it shapes more than crops and rivers. It shapes the mind and spirit, inviting gentle presence, careful gratitude, and quiet wonder. Rain teaches that abundance is never owed, only gifted, and that acknowledgement, whether through ceremony, song, or silent reflection, is a bridge between human life and the wider cycles that sustain it. Each drop that falls carries both nourishment and memory, reminding us that life is both fragile and enduring, fleeting and eternal, ever moving in rhythm with forces larger than ourselves. Chapter 16. Masks of Transformation. Masks have long held a quiet, profound place in human culture. In tribal societies, they were never mere decoration. Each mask was an embodiment of a story, a spirit, or a moral lesson. Crafted from wood, clay, bone, or woven fibers, they carried the weight of generations, linking the wearer to ancestors, deities, and the hidden energies of the natural world. To Dan, a mask was not simply to hide one's face. It was to step across a threshold, entering a realm where the mortal and the sacred could meet. The process of creating a mask was itself a ritual. Craftsmen and shamans often worked together, selecting materials with care, guided by observation, intuition, and tradition. Certain trees were chosen for their strength, resilience, or spiritual associations. Pigments were derived from minerals, plants, or charcoal, each hue infused with meaning. Even the act of carving or shaping was undertaken with deliberate mindfulness, often accompanied by prayers or chants that invoked the presence of ancestors or spirits. In every curve, every line, and every painted mark, the mask became a vessel, a silent container for stories that transcended the individual in ceremony. Masks transformed the wearer. Movements became symbolic, gestures carefully considered, and the rhythm of dance or song was heightened by the presence of the mask. The audience, too, was transported. A mask could inspire awe, fear, or reflection, creating a shared space where the unseen became perceptible. Some masks represented animals, linking humans to qualities observed in nature: the wisdom of the owl, the cunning of the fox, or the strength of the bear. Others embodied ancestral figures, teaching lessons of courage, humility, or justice. Each mask was a reminder that the world extends beyond immediate perception, and that moral and spiritual truths often arrive cloaked in form and ritual. Masks were also tools for moral guidance. In many cultures, they appeared in initiation rites, marking the passage from childhood into adulthood. The mask would guide the initiate through challenges, symbolically teaching the responsibilities, courage, and awareness required in their community. These ceremonies were often performed in darkness, with firelight flickering across the carved features, emphasizing the interplay between concealment and revelation. The experience was immersive. The initiate did not simply witness the lesson, they embodied it, carrying the teaching into life beyond the ceremony. The symbolic power of masks extended beyond the human sphere. Some tribes believed masks could communicate with spirits, acting as intermediaries that carried messages between the mortal and divine worlds. Certain masks were considered living objects, imbued with protective energies or healing properties. They were brought into homes, placed in sacred spaces, or carried into battle, serving as silent guardians. In each context, the mask demanded respect, for to misuse or disregard it was to risk severing the connection it maintained with the spiritual realm. Masks also facilitated transformation through storytelling. When worn, they allowed performers to inhabit roles, to speak truths that might otherwise remain unspoken. Tales of creation, heroism, and morality unfolded with heightened resonance, the physical form of the mask amplifying the narrative. Audiences experienced not only the content of the story, but its presence in space and time. In this way, masks became instruments of cultural memory, preserving wisdom across generations, making intangible truths tangible through form, movement, and ritualized expression. The quiet magic of masks is found in this delicate tension. They conceal and reveal, protect and teach, connect the past with the present. Observers of these ceremonies often describe a sense of otherworldliness, a gentle agitation that asks them to reconsider the boundaries between self and spirit. The mask invites reflection, prompting questions about identity, morality, and the unseen forces that shape life. In the subtle gestures of performance, the flicker of firelight on carved eyes, and the cadence of movement, One can sense the layered meanings embedded in every form, even outside of formal ritual. Masks left traces on communal consciousness. Stories about them were told, describing their powers, the spirits they housed, or the lessons they conveyed. They became symbols of transformation available to all, reminders that human expression itself could carry sacred weight. In this way, masks were both personal and communal. An individual wearer could experience the transformative moment, while the community witnessed, remembered, and participated in the ongoing dialogue between the living and the unseen through masks. Humans learned to navigate complexity with mindfulness. They discovered that the visible is never all there is, that identity can shift, and that moral guidance can be conveyed not only through words but through presence, form, and ritual. The experience of mask wearing was a meditation in action, a gentle invitation to inhabit different perspectives, to walk with courage and awareness, and to honor the subtle forces that animate life in contemplating masks. One might reflect on the many forms we wear in daily life, and on how ritual and expression serve as bridges to something larger than ourselves. Just as the mask carries the essence of spirits, stories, and moral wisdom, so too can our gestures, intentions, and awareness carry meaning into the world. Each mask holds a question, a quiet challenge, to see beyond the familiar, to honor the hidden, and to allow transformation in ways both seen and unseen. Chapter 17. The Quiet of Burial Rites. In the rhythms of tribal life, death was never abrupt or forgotten. It was acknowledged with care, attention, and deep reflection, rather than a simple cessation of existence. The passing of a member of the community was understood as a passager, transformation of the spirit, a return to the earth, and a continuation of the unseen cycles that guided life. Burial rites, in this context, were both practical and profoundly spiritual. They were moments where the living paused to honor, to remember, and to connect with the eternal dot. From the moment of death, the body was treated with reverence. Certain tribes prepared the deceased with careful cleansing, anointing with herbs, and wrapping in fabrics or leaves, each chosen for symbolic or protective qualities. These gestures were not merely ritualistic. They reflected an understanding that the body still carried traces of the spirit, and that the transition required mindful attention. In some societies, these preparations took days, allowing family members to grieve, to share stories, and to perform small acts of devotion. The physical care mirrored the inner reflection, reminding the living that death was part of a larger cycle, a quiet echo of creation itself. Burial grounds were themselves sacred spaces, often set apart from daily life. These locations were chosen for their connection to the land on hilltops, near rivers, or within groves of trees. The placement was intentional, meant to situate the departed within natural cycles of growth, decay, and renewal. Stones, carvings, or markers were sometimes added, not simply as monuments, but as guides for memory and orientation. Each mound or circle represented both the individual and the lineage from which they came. Walking among these sacred spaces was a contemplative act, a silent meditation on the continuity of life, and on the interwoven existence of community and nature. Ceremonial elements were integral to the rites. Songs, chants, and prayers often accompanied the lowering of bodies into the earth. The tones were measured, deliberate, carrying a weight of acknowledgement and gratitude. Some communities incorporated fire, smoke, or fragrant herbs, connecting the ritual to air and transformation. In other regions, water played a central role, symbolizing purification and passage. Through these ceremonies, the community collectively witnessed the movement of the spirit, honoring its journey while reaffirming their own place within the cycles of life and death. Objects placed with the deceased were carefully chosen, often reflecting personal belongings, symbols of status, or items meant to assist the spirit in the journey ahead. Tools, ornaments, or woven textiles were not trivial. They carried intention, blessing, and memory. In many cases, these offerings also served the living, providing tangible anchors for mourning, remembrance, and reflection. The interplay between material and spiritual in these rites illustrates the holistic view. Tribal societies held life and death, earth and spirit. Remembrance and presence were inseparable. Some tribes also incorporated communal storytelling within burial rites. Elders and shamans recounted the life of the departed, the deeds and wisdom that shaped the community, and the lessons that would endure. This oral element was more than ceremony. It was a living archive. The act of speaking the name, of recounting stories, allowed memory to flow into the present, binding past, present, and future. In the quiet of these gatherings, grief was acknowledged, yet so too was continuity, reinforcing the notion that death, while final in one sense, was part of an ongoing spiritual journey. Silence was as meaningful as song or speech. In the moments when words ceased and the only sounds were wind through leaves, water over stones, or the quiet footsteps of mourners, the depth of reflection was profound. These pauses allowed participants to connect with the intangible, to sense the presence of spirits lingering near, and to feel their own lives in relation to the cycles of the world around them. The sacred silence emphasized respect, mindfulness, and the intimate understanding that some aspects of existence could not be rushed or fully comprehended. They could only be witnessed. The rites were not solely for honoring the dead. They were also formative for the living. Witnessing death with ritual and reflection shaped how individuals approached life. Respect for the cycles of nature, the impermanence of existence, and the interconnection of all beings was reinforced in every gesture of the ceremony. Even the act of walking away from the grave, leaving offerings, or returning to daily life became a conscious acknowledgement of mortality, encouraging a mindful, intentional approach to living in some cultures. Burial sites became centers of ongoing reflection. Annual visits, seasonal ceremonies, or offerings tied the living to the cycles of their ancestors. This continuity emphasized that memory and spiritual presence were not confined to a single moment, but flowed through generations. Such practices fostered cohesion within communities, reminding them that life extended beyond immediate perception, and that the bonds between the living and the dead were maintained through care, attention, and ritualized remembrance. In contemplating these quiet rites, one observes a profound intimacy between humans and the land, humans and spirit, and between the living and the departed. The care invested in burial practices reflects a sensitivity to cycles, a respect for memory, and an awareness of unseen worlds. It also prompts reflection on our own approaches to mortality, how we honor, how we remember, and how we integrate the lessons of those who have passed into our ongoing journey. Perhaps most striking is the balance inherent in these rituals. They are gentle yet firm, solemn yet sustaining, communal yet intensely personal. Death is acknowledged not with fear or avoidance, but with mindfulness and reverence. The quiet of burial rites becomes an enduring presence in memory, a soft, persistent reminder of the continuity that underlies life and the care with which we navigate the passage from one world to the next. And in this quiet, as stones settle and fire fades, one may wonder, when we step beyond the immediate, when we honor the silence, can we sense the voices of those who have walked before, guiding our steps even now along paths unseen yet deeply felt? Chapter 18. Celestial alignments for countless generations. The night sky was both a map and a mirror. Tribal societies looked upward, tracing the paths of stars and planets, noting the rhythm of moons, and recording the passing of seasons through celestial markers. These observations were never purely scientific, nor purely spiritual. They existed in a space where practical knowledge and sacred understanding intertwined. The heavens guided planting, hunting, and travel, while simultaneously offering a framework for myth, ritual, and reflection. Each alignment, each eclipse, was a signal of cycles far beyond human perception, yet intimately connected to daily life. Stars were among the earliest teachers. Their constellations became repositories of memory, vessels for stories, and guides for behavior. In some tribes, particular stars were associated with ancestors, watched over by spirits whose presence was felt in the flickering lights above. Others connected the movement of planets to omens, understanding that the heavens were not distant and indifferent, but alive with intention, a dialogue with the human and natural world. This dual understanding, practical and mystical, allowed the cosmos to serve as a living guide, shaping both action and contemplation. Eclipses, in particular, were profound moments. The temporary dimming of the sun or moon was observed with careful attention, often accompanied by ritual acts designed to honor the change, to protect the community, or to interpret the meaning of the phenomenon. Silence, song, and focused observation all played a role. Such events reminded tribes that time and light were not constants but part of larger, rhythmic patterns that demanded awareness and respect. The celestial bodies, in their steady arcs, prompted reflection on impermanence, continuity, and the subtle movements that structure life. Many tribes also constructed physical marker stone circles, alignments, or mounds to record celestial events. These structures were deliberate, precise, and deeply symbolic. They functioned as calendars, mapping solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles. But they also served as places of meditation, where the community could gather to align themselves with the cosmos. The act of standing within these spaces, witnessing the rise and fall of celestial bodies, was itself a ritual of attunement, connecting human perception to the vast rhythms of the universe. Rituals often coincided with these celestial moments. Seasonal festivals, planting and harvesting ceremonies, and rites of passage were synchronized with the sun, moon, and stars. Timing was essential, not merely for practical outcomes, but for the symbolic resonance it created. To act in harmony with the sky was to acknowledge a larger order, to participate consciously in cycles of creation, decay, and renewal. Participants in these rituals experienced both grounded presence and transcendence, sensing their place within a system far greater than any individual life. The observation of the night sky also cultivated a meditative calm, watching stars trace their slow paths, tracing the silver arcs of the moon, or noting the sudden brightness of a planet or comet encouraged a quiet awareness. Eyes lifted to the sky, hearts attuned to its rhythm, minds could drift into reflection on cycles of life, personal journeys, and the delicate balance between earthly concerns and cosmic continuity. The heavens, vast and distant, offered a stillness that mirrored the inner landscapes of contemplation, a gentle reminder of patience, perspective, and wonder. Tribal cosmologies wove together these observations with mythology, ethics, and philosophy. Stories told of celestial beings, of battles and unions among stars, of lessons encoded in the arc of the heavens. These narratives provided moral and spiritual guidance, translating patterns of light and shadow into human understanding. The cosmos became both a teacher and a companion, its movements reflecting the principles by which communities lived: balance, vigilance, respect, and connection. In addition to observation and ritual, navigation was another crucial aspect of celestial alignment. Hunters, herders, and travelers relied on the positions of the sun and stars to move safely through forests, plains, and rivers. Knowledge of the heavens was knowledge of the land. To misread the sky could mean loss or misdirection. Yet even in these practical applications, there was reverence. Navigating by the stars was an exercise in humility, a recognition that survival depended on attentiveness, respect, and harmony with the rhythms of the cosmos. Certain astronomical events became markers for storytelling. The first appearance of a new star, the crescent of a new moon, or the passing of a comet was remembered, recorded, and interpreted for generations. Elders and shamans would recount these occurrences in narrative form, connecting celestial phenomena to human experience. Through these stories, communities preserved wisdom, encoded knowledge of timing and season, and offered reflection on the cycles that governed both the sky and human life. The integration of celestial observation into daily and spiritual life created a profound awareness of time. Not the mechanical time of clocks and calendars, but the living time of cycles, patterns, and relations. Each day, month, and season was understood as part of a continuum, unfolding in concert with the movements above. This awareness fostered patience, attentiveness, and a deep appreciation for the interdependence of human action and cosmic order. Life was measured not only by events on the ground, but by the slow, steady passage of celestial bodies across the night sky. In contemplating these alignments, one also perceives the subtle intimacy between humans and the cosmos. Every glance upward was an act of dialogue, a gesture of recognition and respect. Ritual, observation, and meditation intertwined to cultivate both practical wisdom and spiritual insight. The sky was both a mirror and a mapper, source of guidance, reflection, and connection to forces greater than the individual, yet profoundly linked to each moment of human life. Perhaps what remains most compelling is the stillness inspired by the heavens. To stand under a canopy of stars, to notice the subtle drift of planets or the slow change of the moon, is to confront both the vastness of existence and the quiet constancy of order. It is a reminder that in the movement of the cosmos, there is rhythm, there is pattern, and there is a gentle invitation to align one's own life with the cycles of time, light and shadow. And as night deepens, and the stars glide on their ancient courses, one may quietly wonder, in our modern lives, disconnected from the intimate observation of the sky, do we still carry a sense of the cosmic rhythm within us? Or have we forgotten the calm wisdom the heavens once offered? Chapter 19. The Whispering Winds. Wind has always been more than movement. It is voice, gesture, and presence. In tribal societies, the currents of air were observed as carefully as the stars or the rivers, interpreted not only for practical guidance, but for spiritual insight. The rustle of leaves, the shifting of sand, The gentle brushing against skin, each nuance could carry meaning. Wind became a teacher, a messenger that spoke in subtle codes, urging attentiveness, patience, and reverent stillness. For hunters, the direction of the wind dictated approach. Tracking an animal meant understanding how scent and sound traveled, how the unseen flows of air could reveal or conceal life. Yet even in these practical uses, there was recognition of a deeper order. Wind was not merely a neutral force, was alive, carrying memory, spirit, and intention. A sudden gust might be a warning, a shift in rhythm, a prompt to pause, reflect, or adjust course. In every breath that brushed across the skin, the human and natural worlds intersected. Tribal traditions often attributed personalities or spirits to the wind. Some believed that ancestors rode on breezes, whispering guidance or protection. Others saw the wind as a messenger from distant places, delivering omens of change, fertility, or danger. Ceremonies and rituals were designed to honor these unseen forces, to align human action with their currents. People would raise prayers or offerings, not in the hope of controlling the wind, but to acknowledge its presence and express gratitude for its gifts. In many cultures, particular winds were celebrated or feared depending on their timing, strength, or origin. A seasonal change in wind could mark the approach of rains, the migration of animals, or the opening of harvest. The sound of a nocturnal breeze through the forest might inspire dreams, visions, or storytelling. Attentiveness to wind created a subtle form of attunement awareness that life is woven through forces often invisible, yet profoundly influential. Wind also shaped sacred architecture and ritual spaces. Open courtyards, raised platforms, and carefully oriented dwellings were designed to catch or channel breezes, allowing the air to carry songs, chants, and smoke during ceremonies. The movement of wind through these spaces was considered part of the ritual itself, a gentle participant in human expression. It amplified the presence of sound, shifted the aroma of herbs, and subtly guided focus. In this way, the wind became not only a messenger, but a collaborator in sacred practice. Observation of wind required patience and quiet attention. Tribes learned to read the subtle shifts, the trembling of a reed, the sudden hush in a valley, the rhythm of waves along a shoreline. Each detail offered insight into the state of the world, the seasons, and even human behavior. Wind encouraged mindfulness, training individuals to perceive beyond the obvious, to feel the interconnection of life and the invisible currents that sustain it. The practice of listening became a form of meditation, a way to inhabit both body and environment fully. Oral traditions often include wind as a character or storyteller. Its presence in myth and legend reflects its dual nature, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, always transformative. Through these narratives, humans learned to respect unpredictability, to act in harmony with forces larger than themselves, and to find meaning in the quiet or sudden messages carried across landscapes. The wind, ever changing, offered constant lessons in humility, awareness, and the impermanence of circumstance. Wind also influenced spiritual discipline. Some tribes used breathing exercises and movement rituals that mirrored or followed the flow of air. Chanting in harmony with gusts, walking with attention to breeze direction, or observing the way wind shaped natural forms cultivated a deeper connection between body, mind, and environment. This intimate attunement reinforced a philosophy of presence, where life was experienced as a series of interactions with subtle forces that demand both respect and reflection. Even in stillness, wind has a voice. Standing atop a ridge, beneath swaying trees, or along a quiet riverbank, one becomes aware of its textures and cadences. A soft sigh might inspire reflection. A sudden surge might awaken vigilance. It is through this gentle interplay that the wind teaches lessons often overlooked in hurried life: the value of patience, the necessity of attentiveness, and the grace inherent in listening. Wind, in its whispering, embodies impermanence and continuity simultaneously. It touches all things yet remains free, intangible yet perceptible. By attuning to its rhythms, tribes cultivated a profound awareness of the present, of cycles, and of the subtle interdependence between living beings and the forces that move around them. There is an elegance in its lessons. Guidance need not be forceful. Messages may come softly. An understanding emerges in silence and reflection. Perhaps the most enduring quality of wind as a teacher is its quiet insistence. It never commands, yet it shapes landscapes, carries seeds, and stirs thought. The winds of night or dawn remind us that life is not only a sequence of events, but a flow of messages, urging observation, gratitude, and humility. They invite us to pause, to listen, and to allow understanding to arrive through subtle, patient attention. And so, as the breeze brushes across the earth and through the mind, one may find a gentle question lingering: what messages pass through our own lives, unnoticed yet shaping our paths, if only we take the time to listen? Chapter 20. The Sacred Union of Life and Land. For ancient tribes, life was inseparable from the land. The soil beneath one's feet, the water flowing through streams, the rhythm of the seasons, and the creatures that moved across the terrain were not merely resources, they were companions, teachers, and sacred partners. Understanding this union required attentiveness, humility, and a willingness to observe the subtle exchanges that shaped the natural world. Tribes saw themselves not as masters of the earth, but as participants in a living, breathing network of life, where every choice carried both consequence and meaning. Ceremonies and rituals often celebrated this profound connection. Seasonal festivals marked planting and harvest, yet they were far more than practical markers of survival. They were acknowledgments of reciprocity, humans receiving sustenance, guided by the unseen forces of earth, water, and sky. Offerings, sometimes seeds, sometimes small tokens of gratitude, were given to honor this interdependence. Songs, chants, and dances accompanied these acts, designed not to entertain alone, but to align human energy with the larger currents of life. In these moments, the boundaries between human and land blurred, revealing a quiet, enduring harmony. Many tribes cultivated deep knowledge of local ecology, observing how plants grew in particular soils, how animals moved with the seasons, and how water shaped landscapes. This understanding was not simply practical, it was spiritual. Knowing the forest, the river, the stone, and the sky allowed people to anticipate the needs of the land as well as their own. Sacred groves, ritual gardens, and well-tended fields became living classrooms, teaching patience, attentiveness, and care. Even a single plant, harvested thoughtfully, was recognized as carrying its own spirit, deserving respect and mindful use. Water, too, was central to this union. Rivers were not merely conduits of life, they were sacred pathways, reflecting cycles of renewal and passage. Springs were visited for purification, lakes for reflection, and rains were invoked through ceremony, not to compel but to honor the generosity of the heavens. Water connected humans to distant places and unseen forces, its motion both practical and symbolic. In this interplay, tribes learned a rhythm of reciprocity, to take, but also to give, to witness, and to preserve. The ethics embedded in these practices was subtle yet profound. Every act of cultivation, hunting, or gathering was guided by awareness of impact. Excess or carelessness could disrupt harmony, not simply materially but spiritually. Elders taught that the land itself remembers every footprint. Every cleared patch, every tilled field becomes part of an ongoing dialogue. By honoring this dialogue, humans found guidance, insight, and a sense of place within a vast, interconnected world. Ceremonial spaces often reflected these principles. Circular enclosures, raised mounds, or sacred clearings were chosen not arbitrarily, but for their alignment with natural flow sunlight, wind, water. Fire was central in many rituals, its warmth and smoke linking earth, air, and spirit. Participants would move around these centers with deliberate rhythm, sometimes offering words, gestures, or songs to maintain connection with the land. In the repetition of these acts, consciousness expanded beyond the self, reaching toward the shared pulse of life. Even daily tasks were infused with mindfulness. Planting a seed, gathering berries, or tending an animal was done with attention to timing, technique, and intention. Each act became a meditation, an opportunity to listen, observe, and respond. Such attentiveness cultivated a gentle wisdom. Life is sustained not by force, but by understanding. Not by dominance, but by alignment with enduring patterns. Over time, this approach nurtured communities capable of resilience, respect, and deep reflection. Animals held a unique place within this union. They were teachers, guides, and participants in spiritual life. Hunting or herding was undertaken with ceremony, ensuring that the act honored both human need and the creature's essence. Every life taken or shared was recognized as part of a larger cycle. Songs, dances, or offerings accompanied these practices, reflecting gratitude and acknowledgement of continuity. This awareness of interdependence of life, feeding life, was a cornerstone of ethical and spiritual thought. Sacred unions of life and land were also expressed through storytelling. Myths, legends, and oral histories often depicted humans as inseparable from rivers, forests, and mountains. Tales emphasized cooperation with the natural world, illustrating the consequences of neglect or arrogance, and the rewards of care and reverence. Through these stories, the wisdom of generations was passed gently, encouraging listeners to inhabit the land with attentiveness and respect, to see themselves not as separate but as part of an enduring web. The quiet meditation that accompanies connection to land is perhaps the most enduring lesson. Standing beneath a canopy of trees, listening to water over stones, or feeling the wind across open plains, one senses the rhythms that sustain life. These rhythms are subtle, evident, not in spectacle, but in stillness and observation. They teach patience, encourage reflection, and reveal patterns that guide behavior and understanding. In honoring them, humans discover not only practical guidance, but spiritual grounding, a sense of belonging that transcends time. Through ritual, attention, and reverent practice, tribes cultivated a consciousness attuned to cycles, rhythms, and relationships. The sacred union of life and land was never merely symbolic. It was practical, spiritual, and ethical simultaneously. In observing it, humans learned humility, patience, and interconnection. They witnessed the intricate dance of growth, decay, and renewal, and in doing so, discovered that their own lives were threads within a vast continuous tapestry. Perhaps the quietest wisdom of this union is that respect is reciprocal. The land teaches those who listen, heals those who tend it, and offers insight to those who observe. In turn, human actions, thoughtful, reverent, and mindful, sustain the land, honor its creatures, and preserve its patterns. To participate fully in this union is to recognize that life is shared, fragile, and endlessly instructive, and so, as the sun warms the soil, as water flows gently along familiar courses, and as the wind stirs leaves in measured rhythm, one might pause to reflect: how does our presence honor the earth's pulse? And in what ways might we learn the quiet lessons that emerge only when we walk with care, observation, and reverence? Chapter 21. Rituals of Passage. Life, in its unfolding, was never left unobserved by ancient tribes. From the first cry of a newborn to the quiet reflection of old age, each stage was marked, honored, and guided through ritual. These ceremonies were not merely social constructs, they were profound acknowledgments of transformation, teaching lessons in resilience, belonging, and spiritual continuity. By observing the cycles of birth, growth, and passage, tribes created a rhythm of life that intertwined the human experience with the sacred patterns of the world. Birth, the first of life's great transitions, was met with reverence. The arrival of a child was not a private event. It was a communal acknowledgement that life had returned anew to the world. Midwives and elders often guided the process, blending practical care with ritual gestures. Herbs, water, and fire were carefully arranged, each element carrying symbolic significance. Smoke from sacred plants or small fires was believed to cleanse and protect, creating a bridge between the newborn and the unseen realms. These rituals offered the child its first encounter with the spiritual environment, situating human life within the larger web of nature and ancestral presence. Naming ceremonies followed, often days or weeks after birth. Names were not arbitrary. They were reflections of lineage, environment, or spiritual observation. A child might be named for a river, a star, or a particular trait seen in early moments. This naming was a declaration of identity, but also a gentle guidance, a subtle instruction on how one might move through life in harmony with family, tribe, and land. The act of naming tied the individual to memory and expectation, ensuring that each life carried continuity beyond the self. As children grew, rites of initiation marked their passage toward maturity. These ceremonies were tender but deliberate, designed to teach responsibility, reflection, and endurance. Young people might undergo challenges, symbolic journeys, or periods of learning in solitude or with mentors. Often, they were introduced to the ways of the land, the care of animals, or the stewardship of plants. These rites were never harsh for mere trial. Rather, they were invitations to listen, observe, and embody the wisdom of the tribe and the natural world. In these moments, the lessons were both practical and spiritual, embedding resilience and attentiveness within the fabric of young lives. Adolescence, a time of transformation, was celebrated with ceremony and reflection. Ritual dances, songs, or communal gatherings marked this stage, allowing peers and elders to witness the transition. These acts affirmed identity and belonging, showing that each individual had a role in the community and a responsibility to maintain the delicate balance between self, tribe, and nature. Even challenges within these rites were framed as opportunities for insight, to endure with mindfulness, to act with awareness, and to recognize the sacred continuity of life, marriage, and union. 2 were framed as rituals of passage. Partnerships were often understood as extensions of communal and ecological harmony, not merely personal choice. Ceremonies honored the joining of individuals while acknowledging the broader rhythms of life that they would now navigate together. Offerings, symbolic gestures, and shared vows served as reminders that partnership is both a social and spiritual commitment. These rituals emphasized cooperation, attentiveness, and gratitude, teaching that each union carries responsibility toward the land, the community, and the unseen forces guiding life. Even the later stages of life were marked with reflection and ritual. Elders, recognized for their wisdom and experience, were often honored through ceremonies that highlighted continuity and guidance. Their stories, advice, and quiet presence were considered treasures, connecting the living to memory, tradition, and ancestral lineage. Such rituals affirmed that life's passage was a circle, not a line, and that every stage, whether entry into the world, the threshold of adulthood, or the approach of death, was part of an ongoing, sacred rhythm. Death, too, was observed with care. Funerary rites varied, but their essence remained consistent: to honor the departed, to guide their spirit, and to support the community in understanding the continuity of life. Offerings, songs, and symbolic gestures accompanied burial or cremation, framing the transition as natural and respected. By witnessing and participating, community members learned that mortality is not an abrupt end, but a gentle transformation, one stage within the eternal cycles of existence. Across these rites of passage, several principles emerge. Transformation is acknowledged, not resisted. Guidance and teaching are gentle, not forceful. Participation is communal, reflecting a shared responsibility for the individual's journey. The ceremonies were infused with both practicality and spirituality, reminding participants that life cannot be separated from the cycles of nature, from ancestral memory, or from the rhythms that sustain the earth. Every act, no matter how simple, was imbued with intention, observation, and respect. Symbolism was central to these rituals. Fire, water, plants, animal motifs, and geometric arrangements served as markers of transition and conduits for spiritual reflection. Movement, song, and silence were equally important, allowing participants to embody and witness change. In some traditions, temporary isolation or guided meditation encouraged inner reflection, emphasizing the quiet, personal work that accompanies transformation. Through these practices, tribes cultivated resilience and insight, teaching that growth requires both external support and internal attunement. Perhaps the most profound lesson of these rituals is the awareness that each passage is both individual and collective. A birth transforms the parents, the community, and even the land as it is recognized and integrated. A rite of maturity teaches not only endurance but responsibility toward the tribe and environment. Death reminds all of the cycles that continue beyond individual life. Each ceremony, then, is a meditation on connection to people, to place, and to the invisible threads that bind past, present, and future through generations. These rites of passage built continuity, resilience, and reflection into the fabric of tribal life. They offered structure and meaning, ensuring that transitions, however subtle or profound, were observed with care and intention. They taught that life's changes are not to be feared but embraced, guiding individuals and communities toward a mindful participation in the eternal rhythm of existence. And so, as one considers the quiet ceremonies of birth, the gentle trials of maturity, the bonds of union, and the reflective rites of passage that prepare us for final rest. It becomes clear that the cycles of life are neither accidental nor separate from the sacred. Each stage invites observation, attention, and gratitude, whispering a truth that may be felt more than spoken. That transformation, when approached with reverence and mindfulness, is the essence of living fully and harmoniously within the world. Chapter 22. The Eternal Circle of Memory. Memory was the quiet pulse that sustained tribal life. It was more than recollection. It was the living thread connecting past and present, the unseen bridge that allowed knowledge, values, and spirit to flow across generations. In societies without written texts, memory itself became sacred. Stories, songs, and ritual were vessels for this remembrance, carrying wisdom, warning, and wonder. They ensured that the experiences of elders, the lessons of ancestors, and the rhythms of the natural world were never lost, but were instead woven into the daily consciousness of the community. Oral storytelling formed the backbone of this enduring memory. Elders, shamans, and keepers of tradition spoke with careful cadence, often pausing to let meaning settle, allowing the listener's mind to absorb not just words but the weight of experience. Each tale was layered, practical, moral, and spiritual simultaneously. Some recounted events of survival, teaching young members where and when to hunt, gather, or seek shelter. Others explored the unseen, describing spirits, cosmology, and the subtle ethics of coexistence. Through these narratives, memory became a living, breathing entity, carrying both instruction and reflection. Songs, too, acted as vessels of remembrance. Melodies mapped landscapes, seasons, and cycles of life, embedding knowledge in rhythm and tone. A simple refrain could carry generations of wisdom, ensuring that even those who could not read or write understood the movements of sun, moon, and star. In the act of singing together, communities synchronized not only their voices but their attention, aligning the individual's inner awareness with collective experience. Music became a meditation on continuity, a gentle reminder that one's life was part of a larger unbroken tapestry. Ritual further anchored memory. Ceremonies commemorated births, deaths, seasonal shifts, and ancestral deeds, providing tangible and embodied connections to the past. When a ritual was enacted, participants moved within the same gestures, around the same fire, along the same sacred path as their forebears. In this repetition, memory was not only preserved, it was experienced. Each participant became a living vessel of remembrance, carrying forward the lessons of generations through both action and reflection. Symbols and sacred objects reinforced this continuity. Stones, carvings, masks, and tools were imbued with memory, each mark telling a story or guiding attention to an unseen truth. A carved boulder at a river's bend might mark a legendary event or the limits of ancestral territory. A ritual mask might embody a spirit whose guidance had protected the tribe for decades. By interacting with these objects, individuals engaged with collective memory, learning that knowledge could reside not only in words and song but in shape, pattern, and place. The act of remembering within these cultures was never passive. It required mindfulness, listening, and reflection. Memory demanded presence. To hear a story was to participate in it, to let it shape understanding and behavior. To sing a song was to join in the preservation of wisdom and the shaping of identity. In this way, memory was alive, sustained by intention, reverence, and communal participation. It was an ongoing conversation across time, a dialogue between the living and the departed, the seen and the unseen. Generational continuity was therefore both practical and spiritual. Memory allowed survival in a complex environment. It ensured that knowledge of edible plants, hunting grounds, water sources, and weather patterns was never lost. But it also provided ethical and spiritual guidance. Stories of moral choice, consequences, and sacred law taught responsibility to others, to the land, and to the unseen. Knowledge, once internalized, became part of the individual's character, guiding decisions in harmony with both tradition and nature. Yet memory was not rigid. It adapted, shifting with each retelling, yet maintaining the essence of truth. This flexibility allowed stories and rituals to remain relevant, responsive to changing conditions while still honoring the past. It was a careful balance, innovation without loss, reflection without forgetting. In this, memory itself became a teacher, showing that continuity does not mean stasis, but attentive evolution within a sacred framework. The communal nature of memory was deeply tied to ritual observation. Seasonal festivals, rites of passage, and communal labor were all opportunities for remembering together. A harvest ceremony might recall ancestral practices, invoking gratitude for generations of work and observation. A dance could recount historical migrations, victories, or trials, making the body a repository of collective memory. In each instance, memory was reinforced not just cognitively but through participation, embodiment, and emotional resonance. Perhaps most poignantly, memory connected the living to those who had passed. Ancestors were present not only in stories but in awareness, in the rhythms of daily life, and in the cycles of nature that mirrored their deeds and guidance. Tribes recognized that forgetting the past could sever these connections, weakening both community and individual understanding. In remembering, they maintained continuity, ensuring that the lessons, values, and wisdom of those who came before continued to inform, protect, and inspire. Even small gestures carried the weight of memory. The placement of a stone, a mark on a tree, the repetition of a phrasal were threads in the eternal circle of remembrance. These acts were subtle, often unnoticed by outsiders, yet profoundly meaningful within the cultural context. Each action reaffirmed identity, ethical orientation, and a connection to the larger rhythms of life and land. Memory, in this sense, was not only cognitive, it was relational, ethical, and spiritual. The circle, recurring in song, ritual, and space, symbolized the nature of memory itself, continuous, interconnected, and unending. There was no beginning or end, only the movement of understanding through time. Individuals, through attentive observation and participation, became both recipients and transmitters, sustaining the flow of knowledge and reflection. Memory was a living continuum, an eternal pulse that carried the essence of the tribe, echoing through generations like the soft, persistent beat of a drum. To dwell in this eternal circle is to recognize that memory is not merely about holding on to what has passed. It is about active engagement, reflection, and gratitude. It is the understanding that each story sung, each ritual observed, each object honored, keeps alive the consciousness of generations. Through this continuous practice, tribes cultivated presence, mindfulness, and a deep sense of belonging. Memory was, in effect, a sacred landscape, shaped by attention, care, and reflection as one contemplates the eternal circle of memory. it becomes clear that our own capacity to remember, reflect, and transmit knowledge is part of the same continuum. Memory links us to what has been, shapes what we do in the present, and informs the world we leave behind. In quiet observation, we may sense the subtle guidance of those who came before, their wisdom woven into the air, the earth, and the stories that continue to ripple outward. And in that we find a soft invitation to listen carefully, remember thoughtfully, and participate fully in the unbroken circle of life, memory, and reflection. Chapter 23. The Last Firelight. The last firelight lingers as night stretches its quiet across the land. Rituals have concluded, voices have softened, and the smoke rises in gentle spirals, carrying memory, gratitude, and intention into the sky. In these final moments, the flames become more than warmth or illumination. They are markers of continuity, reflections of human presence alongside the unseen, and silent witnesses to the passage of time. The fire is a companion, steady and attentive, inviting both mind and body to rest while holding space for reflection. In many tribal cultures, fire was sacred. It was the center of life, a gathering point for community, and a channel through which humans connected with spirits and ancestors. Its flames echoed the eternal cycles of creation, consuming and transforming, yet always returning to embers. As night deepened, the soft crackle and glow reminded those present that they were part of something larger, a continuum of presence and memory that transcended individual life. The fire was a teacher, guiding attention gently to the rhythm of breath, thought, and quiet observation. The shadows cast by firelight are deliberate and telling. They stretch along the earthen walls, shifting with the wind, and in their movement, they tell stories of impermanence and presence. Each flicker marks a lesson in attention, showing that life is lived in transient moments, yet every moment carries weight. In the pause between flames and dark, the mind finds space to settle, reflecting on what has passed and what continues unseen. The interplay of light and shadow mirrors the duality of existence, life and death, seen and unseen, human and spirit. Fires of ritual were more than practical. They were central to ceremonies of renewal, mourning, celebration, and teaching. At their heart was a quiet dialogue, humans speaking in song, chant, or prayer, while the flames responded with warmth and presence. The act of tending a fire, adding wood, and maintaining its glow was itself meditative. It was a practice of mindfulness, a tangible expression of care and connection. Through this simple attention, participants were reminded that the sacred often resides in small, deliberate acts, quietly shaping consciousness and community. Ancestors, in the presence of the fire, were never far away. The glow illuminated their stories, carried in oral tradition, etched into song, and embedded in ritual gesture. As flames danced, shadows of figures long gone seemed to move alongside the living, their lessons and presence softly entwined with the moment. In this shared space, the boundary between past and present softened, and memory became immediate, tangible, and sacred. To sit with a fire at night was to commune with those who had shaped the world, to feel the enduring pulse of lineage, and to recognize one's place within it. The last firelight also held teaching in its temporality. Flames would wane, embers would settle, and night would deepen into quiet darkness. Yet the lessons persisted. Impermanence is natural, reflection is essential, and presence matters. Watching the fire, one could sense the rhythm of life itself, the rise, the peak, and the quiet descent into rest. In this, there was reassurance and serenity. The slow fading of flames mirrored the natural flow of all things, teaching acceptance and patience. Beyond the ritual circle, the world was vast and still. The stars overhead mirrored the flickering fire, distant and constant. The cool night air carried both silence and soft whispers of memory, as if the earth itself acknowledged the gathering. This interplay of elements, the warmth of fire, the chill of night, the distant brilliance of stars, created a meditative space. Observers were invited to internalize these rhythms, letting the firelight guide attention inward, toward reflection, gratitude, and subtle understanding. Even after flames become embers, the presence of the fire lingers in consciousness. It is carried in memory, in the sense of warmth still felt, and in the quiet that follows. The rituals enacted, the words spoken, and the songs sung persist in mind and spirit, forming a continuum that bridges the living and the unseen. This enduring quality is a reminder that sacred acts are never entirely lost. They resonate, influencing perception, thought, and presence long after the last flicker fades. The practice of fire as sacred also reinforced communal connection. Around the flame, stories were shared, guidance was given, and understanding was nurtured. Even in silence, the collective breath of the group, the shared observation of light and shadow, created a subtle unity. Firelight thus becomes a mirror of social and spiritual cohesion, visible, tangible anchor for invisible bonds that tie humans together across time and space. In observing the last firelight, there is a call to attentiveness, to embrace the slow, meditative rhythm of life. It asks one to notice small details, the soft crackle, the scent of burning wood, the movement of shadows. It invites reflection on the cycles that govern existence, both natural and spiritual, and reminds the listener that these cycles are not separate from daily life, but intimately woven into the fabric of being. The fire teaches patience, presence, and the gentle surrender that allows wisdom to settle. As night deepens and embers glow faintly, the mind may drift, carried by the residual warmth and the knowledge that the sacred persists in subtle ways. The firelight, though diminished, continues to touch consciousness, reminding observers that ritual, memory, and reflection are enduring. In these quiet moments, one feels the continuity of existence, the tender care of ancestral guidance, and the soft, unbroken connection between human life and the greater rhythms of the world. And finally, as the last sparks rise and vanish into darkness, the invitation is gentle yet profound, to carry this serenity inward, to honor memory and presence, and to rest within the quiet, knowing that the warmth of connection, reflection, and spirit endures beyond the visible flame. In the final firelight, the heart is guided to peace, the mind to contemplation, and the soul toward a gentle, enduring rest. Chapter 24. Drift into silence. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. In the spaces between breaths, in the pauses between song, in the hush of evening before the first star appears, there exists a quiet that carries meaning. Tribes recognized this truth long before written words codified it. Silence was a presence, a sacred vessel in which spirit and mind could meet. It was a thread that wove together ritual, reflection, and the rhythms of daily life, reminding those who listened that stillness is itself a form of communion. Across landscapes, from forests to deserts, from riverbanks to high plains, silence marked thresholds. It came with dawn and dusk, following the cadence of natural life. To sit within this quiet was to feel time stretch and fold, to notice the subtle movements of air, the faint shift of leaves, the distant call of nocturnal birds. Such attentiveness was a practice, a ritual in itself, where the observer became participant in the vast, unfolding presence of the world. In silence, the ordinary was revealed to be extraordinary. Each sound that did arise, each movement, each breath became more vivid, more deliberate. For ancient tribes, silence carried multiple roles. It was a space of learning, where elders taught without speaking, where ritual gestures held deeper meaning than words could convey. It was a space of respect, where the spirits of ancestors could be acknowledged without intrusion. And it was a space of introspection, where the human heart could trace the contours of memory, hope, and gratitude. To honor silence was to honor life itself, in all its intricate interwoven forms. Ceremonial practices often included intentional pauses, moments when no voice, no instrument, no flame moved the air. In these pauses, participants were encouraged to feel the resonance of all that had been the chants, the dances, the offerings, and to allow them to settle within consciousness. Silence became a mirror, reflecting the interior landscape, allowing insight to rise gently without force. It was not emptiness, but fullness in its softest form. The natural world mirrored this sacred pause. Rivers move with quiet persistence. Mountains stand in patient stillness. The wind whispers in patterns that only careful attention can follow. Observing these rhythms, humans learned the art of listening, to respond, but to understand. This understanding was not intellectual alone. It was a felt knowing, a recognition that the pulse of the earth and the pulse of the spirit are intertwined. Each heartbeat, each inhalation, aligned with the broader cadence of life when one embraced silence. Silence was also a companion to grief and celebration alike. Around fires, after ceremonies, in the hush of sacred groves, humans rested in stillness, letting emotions and reflections settle without disturbance. In mourning, silence offered space for sorrow and remembrance. In moments of joy, it allowed gratitude to deepen, unspoken yet profoundly felt. Across cultures and epochs, the value of these quiet intervals endured, for they held the capacity to renew the mind and spirit, offering clarity that sound alone could not provide. In the context of ritual, silence was a bridge. It connected the living to the departed, the visible to the unseen, the finite to the eternal. To walk a sacred path, to tend a fire, to offer herbs or song, each act gained depth when framed by quiet. The absence of sound heightened perception, revealing layers of meaning in gestures, glances, and movement. Silence became a language, subtle but resonant, understood by those attuned to its rhythm. As listeners drift into the awareness of silence, they may notice its texture. It is never uniform. Some silences are deep and enveloping, like a forest at midnight. Others are fleeting, like the pause between raindrops. Some carry expectation, as if holding space for an imminent revelation. Each form of silence carries its own teaching, inviting patience, presence, and a gentle surrender to what is beyond immediate control. In accepting silence, one learns to inhabit the moment fully, to allow thought and spirit to move with care and awareness. The mind, accustomed to noise and constant activity, may initially resist this stillness. Yet, in patient practice, silence begins to speak. It recounts the echoes of previous experiences, the lessons of firelight and forest, of song and ritual, of earth and sky. It gathers the fragments of wisdom presented throughout life and ceremony, offering them without pressure, allowing them to settle like leaves drifting to the surface of calm water. In this quiet, insight arises not through urgency, but through gentle reflection. Through the patient unfolding of understanding, silence also holds the potential for connection. In stillness, one senses the presence of others without words, the pulse of community, the unseen thread of lineage, and the continuity of shared human experience become palpable. Even alone, a listener may feel joined to countless others who have honored quiet across time and space, their attention and intention echoing softly through the ages. Silence becomes an invisible communion, a circle that requires no speech but carries profound resonance. As night deepens, silence guides the mind inward. Thoughts settle, emotions ebb and flow gently, and awareness widens to encompass both self and environment. The lessons of ritual, the teachings of ancestors, the whispers of wind, and the steady presence of firelight all converge in the pause, in the stillness where spirit and mind meet. In this sacred space, the listener is invited to rest, not in slumber alone, but in attentive presence, absorbing the quiet wisdom that has been offered through countless gestures, songs, and observances. To embrace silence is also to acknowledge the limits of human understanding. There is a humility inherent in stillness, a recognition that not all can be known or controlled. Yet within this humility lies freedom. Freedom to observe, to reflect, to be present without the compulsion to act or interpret. It is in this delicate balance that the deepest insights often emerge, unforced and unhurried, carrying the soft power of clarity and acceptance. And so, as the final chapter invites the listener to drift into silence, there is no instruction, no conclusion, only the gentle guidance of presence. Let the echoes of all previous lessons, rituals, and reflections settle within consciousness. Allow the mind to release, the heart to rest, and the spirit to drift with ease. Like leaves floating on still water, let thought and memory come and go without disturbance, observing their patterns and movements in quiet reverence, in the sacred pause. There is a truth, both simple and profound, that life's fullness is often most deeply understood not through noise or constant seeking, but through the deliberate embrace of stillness. To drift into silence is to encounter the heart of being itself, to recognize the subtle, unbroken rhythm of existence, and to rest within the soft, enduring presence of the world, as it has always been, and as it continues to be. Chapter 25. The breath of the sleeping earth. As night deepens, the world slows. The sun has withdrawn beyond the horizon, and shadows stretch into the quiet folds of the land. In this gentle hour, one can imagine the earth itself inhaling and exhaling, a rhythm as old as time, soft and unhurried. Tribes have long recognized this pulse, a heartbeat beneath the feet, a quiet presence felt more than seen. Life does not pause, entirely it rests, it listens, it breathes. The soil beneath each step is not inert. It holds memory, absorbing the whispers of wind, the weight of rain, the passing of countless seasons. Roots stretch downward, intertwining in a hidden web of connection, reaching for water, warmth, and understanding. Rocks and streams bear witness, silent and enduring, to the ceremonies and journeys of humans who once walked these lands. In every place where fire was kindled, song was sung, or offering placed, the earth remembers. Even in its quietest moments, it breathes the echoes of ritual and reflection. Tribal life was attuned to these subtle rhythms. Hunters waited with patience. Farmers observed the soil and the stars. And elders spoke of spirits whose presence could be felt but not named. In this attentiveness, humans did not dominate the land, they aligned with it. They learned that the earth's pulse mirrored the pulse within themselves. Each inhalation of soil-scented air, each exhalation of smoke or song became a meditation, a conversation with the unseen, a recognition that life is a series of flows and pauses, of giving and receiving, of growth and rest. Rituals often acknowledged this quiet heartbeat. Offerings of grain, water, or smoke were more than acts of utility. They were gestures of awareness, moments in which humans attuned to the living presence beneath and around them. Each ritual carried intention, to honor life, to show gratitude, to maintain balance. In this way, the spiritual and the practical intertwined. Healing herbs were gathered with care, harvests were celebrated with song, and ceremonies were timed with cycles of moon and sun, each act reflecting deep attention to the breathing world. Even in absence, the earth's voice persists. In the gentle rustle of leaves, the trickle of hidden streams, or the soft settling of fog across fields, one can sense the slow, deliberate rhythm of life that continues beneath the surface. This is the pulse that has guided humans across generations, steady, quiet presence that sustains without demand, offering its wisdom to those willing to notice. It teaches patience, reflection, and humility. In listening, one begins to understand the unity of existence, body, spirit, and land, all moving in harmony with a rhythm older than memory. Stories, too, are rooted in this awareness. Tribal myths often speak of the earth as alive, of spirits who move in soil and water, of lessons hidden in the growth of plants and the flight of birds. These stories, carried from elder to child, offer guidance as much as they preserve memory. They remind humans of their place within the living tapestry and of the care required to sustain it. Each tale is a breath of awareness, an invitation to slow down, to observe, to listen with more than ears. In recognizing the sleeping earth, one also recognizes the necessity of rest. Life, no matter how vibrant, requires pause. Night is not merely the end of the day, is a continuation in a different form. Just as humans rest, the land rests. Forests release warmth and moisture, fields absorb dew, rivers flow with soft persistence. Each moment of stillness is a teaching that vitality is sustained through rhythm, and that the deepest connection arises not through force, but through patience and gentle presence. Walking through these ideas, one senses the invisible threads connecting past and present. Rituals performed centuries ago leave their impression on soil and soul alike, shaping the spaces that are still inhabited, guiding footsteps that still follow ancestral paths. The subtle echo of these acts is felt as much in quiet reflection as in physical presence. To pause in this recognition is to honor the continuity of life, to sense the wisdom of those who observed, listened, and acted in harmony with the breath of the world. As one settles into this reflection, the mind can soften. Thoughts may drift as clouds across the sky, passing without force, revealing the calm beneath. The heart, once pulled by the currents of daily life, can synchronize with the slower pulse of earth and air. In this synchronization, there is a profound ease. One realizes that, like the land, the self does not need constant agitation, inhalation and exhalation, attention and release. Listening and resting, these cycles, mirrored in the living earth, offer a model for gentle balance. The rhythms of the sleeping earth remind us too of gratitude. Each breath, each step, each quiet observation is an acknowledgement of life's generosity. Water that nourishes, soil that supports, air that sustains all, are gifts that cannot be commanded, only received with care. Tribes recognized this, offering ceremonies, songs, and quiet devotion as ways of saying, simply, we see you. We are part of you. We honor your presence. In return, the earth responds not with sound, but with steadiness, with life that continues quietly and faithfully in this space. One may feel the convergence of all lessons presented through the journey. The sacredness of stones, the whispers of wind, the rhythm of firelight, the guidance of stars, the cycles of life and death, all these threads gather in the stillness, weaving a tapestry that is invisible yet palpable. There is no need to trace each separately. In the quiet, their unity emerges. Silence, attention, and reflection become the medium through which understanding is transmitted, allowing insight to rise softly, naturally, and without urgency. As the night deepens further, the world invites surrender. One can imagine the land exhaling a slow, steady breath, inviting all who inhabit it to do the same. In this exhalation, there is release from tension, from the constant seeking, from the noise that surrounds modern life. In its place, there is presence, attention, and a profound awareness of being both part of the earth and sustained by it. The sleeping world is not dormant, is attentive, alive, and generously present, offering lessons to those willing to receive them in stillness. And so, as this journey draws to a close, there is only one invitation: to rest within the rhythm of the living earth, to feel its slow breathing, and to let the echoes of ancestral wisdom, ritual, and reflection settle gently within. Allow yourself to drift, as the soil absorbs the moonlight and the streams carry quiet currents, into a meditative calm that is both deep and sustaining. Here, within this stillness, one touches the enduring presence of life itself, presence that has persisted through countless generations, and will continue as the earth breathes softly, endlessly. Beneath and around us, in the quiet of this realization, there is no urgency, no finality, only the gentle unfolding of understanding. A reflection that continues as long as attention is given. A whisper of the sacred rhythm that underlies all existence. Let the mind and spirit rest here, within the breath of the sleeping earth, knowing that calm, continuity, and quiet communion are always present, waiting to be felt.